First item on the agenda, apologies for non-attendance.
Sorry, Chair, I'm going to have to use your microphone. Through you, Chair, we have apologies for non-attendance from Councillor Eales of Northampton Borough Council, with Councillor Janice Duffy substituting. Also have apologies for non-attendance from Councillor Pritchard of South Northamptonshire Council, and apologies for non-attendance from Susan Zeiss, the Northamptonshire County Council Monitoring Officer, who's represented by Sophia Narty, who is the Deputy Monitoring Officer.
Thank you very much. The next item is requests from members of the public to speak. Have we?
We have none, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to declaration of members' interests, if any. You're reminded that if you have a DPI or significant NSDI in a matter to be discussed, whether it's registered or not, you mustn't take part in the debate or vote on that matter and remove yourself from the room, whether you're a member of the panel or not. Okay? No interest? Good. Okay, moving swiftly on to Chair's announcements. This meeting is being webcast live, so members are asked to use their microphones. And as we have a full agenda, I'd like you to please remember that and keep your contributions as focused as possible. I'd just like to feed back, because it was mentioned at, I think, the last meeting, about feeding back from the things like the annual conference. They actually had quite a good report with lots of presentations, which I'm going to send to James to send out to members, so they can see the sort of variety. There's a lot of variety of topics discussed there. One useful piece of information was that the Police Foundation were doing a strategic review of policing, which we hadn't heard anything about. So that was sent out to members before Christmas, because there was an early deadline on that. I was actually asked to run a forum. There were 2 sessions for panels, particularly those that were thinking of taking on fire governance. It was very interesting discussions. I think the conclusion was that every single authority had a different situation. No two seemed to be the same. There was quite a bit of opposition from vested interests at various councils, and it was obviously very different where there was a separate fire authority rather than a county authority, as ours had been. We had some useful discussions and discussed the advantages and any things to look out for. Several were actually in the process of having judicial review, so they were waiting for the outcome of that. But I thought I'd just feed that back to you. Next item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of October. You should all have had a copy of that. Are you, I don't particularly want to go through every page individually asking if there are any corrections, but are there any corrections to matters of fact? We'll go into a few items that were asked for information in a second. Okay. There was a reference on page 6 to Northamptonshire Police Plan on a page, which we haven't had yet, but I believe that has been followed up.
I can give an update on that, Chair. That was actually provided and circulated by email this morning. So when members get back home and check their emails, they should find that.
Okay. Obviously, I haven't checked my emails yet. As I was requested last time, I wrote to all of the MPs for Northamptonshire about the funding formula. I had a reply back from all of them, and virtually all of them have written on since then to relevant ministers and other people in the loop. I've had 2 replies back from them. From the minister that, but basically saying, well, we've given you the extra 57, and the police funding formula will be considered in the context of the 2019 spending round for policing, as well as incoming administration's budget and spending plans following the general election. So, just yes, we're aware there is plans to do the new funding formula. So we've just staked our position, and hopefully they will take some note of it when they're actually doing the new funding formula. On page 10 also, the delivery update on the current agenda includes additional contextual information. So that was one of the things that was asked for at the last meeting, and so you have got that this time. And but we haven't yet received on page 11 the contextual comparative data on police forces produced by HMI CFRS. Is it the HMI CFRS that need to send that to us, or is it just that it hasn't arrived?
My understanding with that was that will be coming through the Commissioner's office, although I stand to be corrected on that if necessary.
Well,
shall I cover that for people? Would that help?
Yeah.
The provisional data has been issued to police forces to check. As soon as that's been finalised, we can make sure that that's put into a report for the panel at an appropriate timescale for you.
And on page 13, we requested budget updates to show variances, which we have got this time as well. So I think most of the items that were requested have been dealt with. It was mentioned also on page 15 that the panel might consider seeking a presentation on ICT. That might be something that might be thought about when we're doing the work programme later on. Any other comments people have got on points from the minutes? Okay.
Just on
Yep.
page 17, the update on purple enabling services as well.
That's on today's agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to be clear then, the panel approves the accuracy of the minutes of the previous meeting,
Everyone happy with the accuracy?
Yeah.
Yep.
in which case could I have
Yep.
your...
Okay.
your Mr. Chair?
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, moving swiftly on. The first substantive item is the Commissioner's delivery update. Could I call on Steve? You have actually had some of the performance stats separate in a colour leaflet as well as in the main leaflet.
Happy New Year to the panel. Seems like a lifetime since we were sat here in October, doesn't it? It's been quite a lot of water under the bridge, I think, in politics and stuff like that. But anyway, so today's report sets out in more detail the work has been undertaken to deliver on the commitments I've made in my office of the Police and Crime Plan and improvements of the Chief Constable to delivering frontline policing. We're talking a little more detail about the improvements in fire, but I won't rob of his glory in a second. Following the general election, and I particularly want to thank their panel for support in writing to the MPs, we will obviously continue to lobby central government to recognise the structural unfairness around the policing formula in respect of Northamptonshire, because it continues to be unfair that we receive less than £8 per head of population from the government compared to similar forces, which of course then puts a higher burden on local taxpayer. And I will continue to update you on anything new. But I was very pleased in one of the replies that we got from the Minister that said recognition of it and that actually this will be considered as part of the spending. Obviously those are warm words. We want to see those in terms of detail. As you also see from the report, it contains more information relating to the performance of the force, which we'll go take some questions on in a minute, as well as detailed updates and work undertaken by both police and fire and rescue following their inspection by HMI CFRS. A great deal of work has already been done to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of both services, and I would like to place on record how pleased I am that progress has been made, and of course the effort on both police and fire in the work that the actual people day in, day out continue to do. But actually, before we take questions, I'm going to hand over to Rob, who's giving you a brief operational update on the performance of fire and rescue. Because some of you recognise there were some real questions in the, I'm going to think it seems like a lifetime ago, wasn't it? October 2018, when the original inspection was done, and then a subsequent re-inspection in the June of 2019. And I think it's important that we provide some reassurance around what's going on in respect of pump availability and response time. So I shall hand over to Rob. Thank you, Rob.
Good afternoon all. Thanks for accepting me here on behalf of the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. And yeah, my name's Rob Porter. I'm the Assistant Chief Fire Officer. I'm Darren's taller brother, not really, and also a little less Cockney, but that's just who I am. What I wanted to do here is just give you a little bit of a very brief update. It's only 6 slides on some of the improvements we've made since. Obviously, the change of governance, where the Commissioner has taken over governance of fire and rescue, and some of the changes we've made. But also our standards of response also. So appliance availability. We published a new IRMP, as we all know, under this new governance. We published clearly within that IRMP that we regularly wanted 14 fire appliances, or a minimum of 14 appliances on the run of the while, and we feel that we've started or even delivered on what we're telling the public of Northamptonshire, and in essence improving those community outcomes as a result. So just to go over. Sorry, technical hitch. So Darren came here previously. I don't think it was the last police, fire and crime panel. It was the one before to talk around the inspectorate. It was our first inspection. We hadn't undergone an inspection like other fire and rescue services hadn't in the past. This is a new thing that came about, and it was really useful for us. And it was useful in the respect that we were under a new governance model. It was great for the Commissioner to be involved in that also, and to also put us on the path that we're on already. So Darren came in and he spoke about 2 causes of concern that HMIC FRS found with us. Just to be clear, the causes of concern weren't across the pillar as a whole, so three pillars: effectiveness, people and efficiency. They were just constituents of those of 2 of those pillars, one under efficiency and one under effectiveness. The one I want to speak to, or give you a little bit of an explanation on today, is the effectiveness one. Just to put you in the picture, they're coming back in March just to have a look to see how we have moved on this cause of concern, with a view to removing the cause of concern for the good. And we truly believe, myself, Darren and Sean, the other Assistant Chief Fire Officer, that we've made that progress, that this cause of concern will be lifted. So the cause of concern, just to reflect, it was the cause of concern was we have serious concerns about Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service's ability to respond to incidents. The service consistently doesn't have available its minimum number of fire engines. Senior managers are not routinely told when this happens. The recommendation being the service should improve its process for monitoring the number of fire engines available so that senior managers can make effective decisions. And if the truth be told, we had it in mobilising policy that we should be monitoring the number of appliances available. We sort of got caught in the rhetoric of the on-call appliances, so retained firefighters. There's a national problem. We can't recruit, we can't retain, and we accepted, almost came to accept, I suppose, that we had regularly under a minimum of 14. Just again to put it into context, I think we are probably one of the only fire and rescue services at the time who published a number as such. Not many other fire and rescue services publish a number or a minimum number they want to get to. We'd done a piece of work back in 2011, 2012, where we identified...
Young boy,
yeah, I was very young then. Which identified probably the minimum number we need to maintain or to look after 2, 3, 4 pump incidents within the county, or a number of at the same time. But that didn't take into account the 13, 16, or our mutual aid arrangements we have with other services. It's for us to sort of maintain that availability as Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service. So what we've done in response to that, we've identified a revised management structure, and we've improved scrutiny arrangements to provide greater oversight of availability issues. So under the Commissioner's tenure, we've identified, or we split the principal management of Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service. So we went from one Chief Fire Officer and a Deputy Chief Fire Officer, and we split 2 remits over 2 Assistant Chief Fire Officers positions, which gave a greater oversight on our service delivery or our response, community safety and community protection aspects. We also identified that we probably need to enhance our senior management board. So on that now we've got a head of protection and a head of prevention, whereas before it was just the head of service delivery that sat within that management structure. Now what has that done? That's allowed the head of service response, that's an area manager we've now took on within the service, in fact started yesterday, to have complete oversight of response alone. And this is what this cause of concern was about. It was about response alone, that we don't have the minimum number of appliances, plus we're not monitoring it, and we're not doing anything about it when we drop below that minimum number. We've also done a number of other things. We've changed shift systems for what we call our community risk group watch managers. So they are now on working 7 days of the week, not each one, but over a rota system, and they're able to provide us with a resource management centre which keeps an eye on our appliance availability on a daily, even hourly basis, to allow us to sort of maintain the availability numbers that we require within this service. We've also enhanced our reporting to predict appliance availability that ensures cover issues are addressed quickly and efficiently. We never really looked at it before. We looked at scorecard. Scorecard showed us, probably the same as the rest of the country, that we were probably getting 50% availability of on-call or retained duty system appliances. And that's probably a national average. We had a target of around about 70–75%. We never got anywhere near that percent, but like I said at the start of this, we saw it as a national problem. It's not our problem, it's a national problem. But it is. It's our problem. It's a problem from the people of Northamptonshire. So what we've now done, we're getting daily reports on availability. The Assistant Chief Fire Officer for Service Delivery is monitoring them daily reports. The new Area Manager Response is monitoring them daily reports. And also the duty command structure on a daily basis is also reporting on those things, looking at the monitoring and moving appliances about, and also individual firefighters about to maintain that availability and that cover. So just to give you a bit of a view as to where we are, so it's not the clearest of slides, and I do apologise for that. And this is only since the 6th of April last year, do apologise, up until November 19, and that's been the curve we've improved our availability on. So whereas we were on 16 or 17 appliances, including flexible crewing, we're now on 20 appliances, average on a daily basis. And we do need to make it clear that night times we've got additional availability. That is daytime. That is daytime. What, that's 24-hour cover. That is night time, where our biggest risk is when people are sleeping in their beds, when people are cooking. We have a large amount of appliances available to us. I just want to explain these 2 lines a little bit. This is another thing that HMI CFRS explained to us, which we didn't declare initially. So we have, within the county, a number of on-call duty sections who have the opportunity to ride with 3 firefighters, or a crew manager and 2 firefighters within the appliance. It's not something to do with regard to the whole time, it's something that we do with the retained, and we send them out to non-complex, non-risk incidents, such as bin fires, those types of things. And that gives us a number of things. The national picture on-call availability is hit by a number of things. Incidents are driven down. So if we join the on-call service, we do 6 months to a year training, and then we never get a call. Numbers fall off because they think, I'm not doing the job I joined. So what we've done, we have certain retained availability crews who can ride on 3, but like I say, they do only go out to certain types of incidents. So that's what we call flexi crewing. Now, we weren't aware that we could declare that when HMI CFRS came around in our numbers, within our appliance availability numbers. HMI CFRS told us every other service does. So we probably sort of fell foul there with regard to those numbers. So the top line you see there, 20 appliances on a daily basis, that's an average daily basis, that's including flexi-crewing. Appliances on 4, so just to give you a little bit of context of why 4 is a driver, someone who operates the pump, and 2 BA wearers. That's what an appliance of 4 is predicated
what
on.
does BA mean?
Breathing apparatus, sorry. Breathing apparatus. Those people who can put the breathing apparatus on and go into a property and effect a rescue as such. That's a minimum of 4. But getting back to the flexi crews, we wouldn't send flexi crews to a house fire. They'd only go to the most minor, non-complex incidents. But we can declare that within our numbers, and we will declare that in numbers when HMIC FRS do come round between August and April next year for the new HMIC.
It's being polite. As you can see, the overall trajectory, even without flexi, continues to see it increasing, and you'll see that has a material effect when we start to talk about response times and some of that.
Yes, Chair, I'm a little bit confused here. If you're only sending out, if you're only sending out flexi crews or retained firefighters for like small fires and things like that, doesn't that affect your response time when you have a major issue? Because you have to determine who you're going to send where, and the other thing is what happens in areas where we only have a retained service? Wouldn't that affect the response time?
Does it do respect? It doesn't necessarily. Okay, just be a little bit of clarity with regard to that. 3. There you go. I'm back on now. 3. It rarely happens. It rarely happens. What I'm not saying is a retained appliance would only have 3 people on it. A retained appliance would have 5, 6 people on it if it can have 6 people on it. But what we did previously, if we didn't have 4 people on it, that retained appliance was not available. So that response time within that retained area would have been affected even more if they weren't on 3. So it's improved response times in that respect. What we will also utilise that smaller crew for is if we have a large fire and we just need people resources at that large fire, we can mobilise that appliance to it also. So I do apologise, I may not explain that extremely well. What I'm not saying is every retained appliance goes out with 3 people. It's the minimum number we have on a retained appliance, and again, they would only go out to non-complex incident. Councillor Strachan, did that answer that question, sir?
Yeah. Thank you.
In a minute, he's going to show that you've broken down by hour.
Just very simply, what's the difference between excluding flexi and including flexi? I didn't quite catch.
Sorry. So the top line there includes those appliances. So that includes the number of appliances we will have with. So it includes all of our appliances, including those who are flexi-crewed. And flexi-crewed is appliances with 3 people who are available. The bottom line there includes all of our appliances, but excludes those flexi appliances. So if we've got, for example, Desborough retained service and also Long Buckby retained riding 3, for that period of 24 hours, we would, with that bottom blue line, we would take those 2 appliances out of that final number. That's the bottom line. But for the top line, they are included in that top number.
So that means the one that the bottom one excluding the bottom one excluding flexi will not have those 3 people that you're talking about.
That's right. It won't have appliances with only 3 people available. And like I've said, that doesn't happen a lot within our fire and rescue service. It just happens every now and again where we do have appliances with 3, and it's only the on-call service when they're available.
And then in normal activity, how often this scenario will apply then?
Sorry, can you say again, please?
This scenario of the bottom line,
Yep.
How often compared to the excluding flexi?
How often?
Yes. I mean, is that the norm, or is it outside of the norm? That's what I just wanted to know.
Is it outside of the norm for us not to, or to have three people on an appliance?
Yes.
It is outside of the norm.
Right.
It is outside of the norm, and like I said, it's only there to give, and again, it's only to provide a little bit of a response to the community, but for only those minimum incidents that pose no risk to the firefighters. That safe person concept. So it is a little bit out of the norm. We're certainly not the only fire and rescue service that does it. But what we do find, it does aid retention of our on-call firefighters. At least they're alerting, they're doing what they want, they're turning out to the community and they're making a difference. And it's driven from our retained service. Okay.
It's worth bearing in mind, even if you took Flexi out, if you look at the blue line of starting point of April last year, you know, it's higher already than the very thing that concerned HMIC and myself when the kind of governance change came in, and the trajectory seems to be higher. As Rob's about to demonstrate, he can tell you at any point of any day what the pump availability is now, and he's going to blind you with science with a wonderful slide that shows you.
Now, yeah. Sure.
Just one point on Councillor Strachan's point is that if your three crew, your flexi crew, is say in Corby, and there is a bin fire in Brackley, I think the point he was making was if you could just send a flexi crew to that, does that impact? Does that make any sense? So are you sending that one or?
No, do apologise. That wouldn't be the case. It'll always be the nearest resource.
Even though it's just a bin fire?
Yes, even though it's a bin fire. Yes. So if we've got, certainly, I do apologise. No, it would be the nearest resource that we send to any incident, be it a bin fire, be it a house fire, be it anything that we turn out to.
The flexi crew, if there was a house fire close to them, they wouldn't be going to that?
They wouldn't go to that because of the complexity. They can be included in the makeup, but what we wouldn't expect them to do is turn out to that house fire first as such.
Because you're right, you might send the Flexi crew with a main pump, if you like, to actually make sure you can deal with it quicker. It gives you additional flexibility, and the key thing about it is to do it without putting any firefighter at risk, but it increases the safety of the people of Northamptonshire.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. So this is the slide that the Commissioner was talking about. So this here is showing cover on a daily basis, even an hourly basis as such. Where it's showing red, and again this is going back to the period of April 2019, where it's showing red, that's showing where we were down below 14 appliances. What we see is a business resilience model as such, and at that point the Gold Command officer will get involved and start to shift appliances about and makes that difference. So that's April. And this is where we are now. Again, it's not the best graphic on here, but this is where we are now, November, and it's improving on a day-to-day basis.
On a simplistic basis, red, bad, lots of red, bad, very little red, good, but you don't want to see any red.
So that's so that's the difference, the increased management support, the moving about appliances.
And Rob, only because I know the answer, you probably can't quite see it as very clearly, but also there is a mixture of yellow in there. What's the difference between red? We know is below 14. What's yellow, Rob?
So thank you, Commissioner. So yeah, red is below 14. Yellow is what we call a strategic resilience model. So what we're showing there is 14 to 17 appliances available on a daily basis or an hourly basis, whatever that is. Then we call that strategic resilience model. So we have a number of things that we do within that period if we're still showing amber. And what we're trying to do is get into this green, not on minimum, but trying to get into the green, which is 17 and above. And that we have found over the past few years gives us excellent resilience to deal with every incident we've got in the county with our own service as such, taking away that mutual aid. So some massive increases from where we were back in April to where we are now, and like I said, that's improved on a daily basis. Also, interesting point there, and again, percentage of time under 14 appliances. Back that week in April, 12.5, we're down to 1.49. Percentage of time, 18 appliances available. There we're at 42. Here at 75%, we've got 18 or more appliances available within this county, which I think is a real huge improvement for where we've come post HMIC FRS, plus also with regard to the governance change. it's made a huge difference, even with our standards of response. It's driven those standards of response down as such. So, greater public outcome. Yeah, it's where we are with regard to this. So, just to touch on response times, a very, very quick slide. So this is where we are with our average response time. So within the IRMP, we published that we wanted an average minimum response to every incident within this county. Bearing in mind, some services don't have an average minimum response. They have varied responses, so 15 minutes to RTCs, etc., etc. We've got a 10-minute minimum response average to every incident we attend. This is where we were within governance change. We were at 11 minutes, 15 seconds response. You do see it goes, it does go up and down. But we've driven that figure down, and it's dropping again as I speak. That figure's going down with increased availability, increased appliance availability, certainly increased rural availability also, which makes the difference. And that's probably where you see the spikes there. The spikes are predominantly for rural, a large amount of rural incidents with that point in time, because predominantly our whole time service is based around the big towns, Northampton, Wellingborough, Corby, Rushden. So, and that's where we are. So just a quick slide there to show you the increase in response times that we've managed to do. Again, that's going back to 2017 up to 2020 now. So a very quick run through as to where we've been with regard to that. Does anybody have any questions?
Martin, you had one a while ago.
Yeah, it wasn't about the presentation. Thank you for that. But can we please come up with a better example of a low-scale fire than a bin fire? You know, 2011 is a long time ago, but heals do take a long time to repair and wounds to heal. You know, we've done a lot of work with the Arson Task Force, so I think we can get a better example of a low-scale fire than a bin fire.
I agree. Sincere apologies.
Bushfire.
Bushfire. I've used that one, Councillor Strickland. Thank you.
Richard, yeah.
Thank you. It's not only protocols and policies that have changed. You seem to have changed working practices. Certainly seems to be a better grip on command and where you are. So for me, really, I suppose, coming from a very rural area, would you say confidently that the residents are now safer because of the changes you've made with regard to fire response, or the same following the changes that you've made?
That's an increase. I think where we're actually going now, the increase in numbers of firefighters, you'll see within the HMIC FRS reports, a greater availability in rural areas, us getting the message out there a lot more often now with regard to more firefighters on the floor who can give that message to the residents. I think we're certainly on a journey. We are getting safer. Anybody's safer. If we can increase our response times or improve our response times, I would say that anybody's going to be safer within a house fire or any other fire for that.
So what about RTCs and cutting people out?
Certainly RTCs, again, exactly the same. RTCs as such, I suppose, happen on the main roads. Again, much the same sort of answer. If we're increasing availability, if we've got a close appliance to that RTC where that RTC happens, I would say that people are safer.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, just to sort of summarise on that, you know, the inspections are important. It's important to dip test where we are as an organisation, but ultimately it is about when we need you, that you're there, and for the incredible work that you do in saving lives. And from what I've seen, certainly from the impression I get, is that if we can increase the safety of our residents, then we're going above and beyond. And I think that improvement is welcome, and we're grateful for you and your staff for putting yourselves in harm's way to look after the residents of Northampton. So thank you.
Slightly different lens on this. So that's with the number of engines available. At the level of the individual engines, which can be down for maintenance, breakdowns, or lack of crewing, do you know where we are on the percentage availability, and are we happy with that?
Sorry, with regard to the numbers of appliances that are off the run because of...
So for example, you could increase these numbers by increasing your number of appliances.
Yeah.
Or you can increase these numbers by sweating your assets, making sure that they are available So with that lens, do we know where we are, and are we happy with the availability of the individual assets?
We are. Well, with regard to the assets themselves, if we're talking appliances, we've got a bit of a we are sweating them on a bit of a journey with regard to that. We've got a new capital plan and a capital strategy in place to sort of replace some of our older appliances. We certainly need some investment within that area. Now, would that make a difference to our availability? I don't know of a station that's off the run at this point in time, and again, I haven't checked the figures today, that's off the run because we haven't got an asset that's available. So we are where we are. We're where we are with regard to availability. If we've got 4 people who are available, we will find a fire appliance for those 4 people that are available as such.
Just to help with that, how many engines in total do we have on? Fire engines, tenders in the typical sense?
Yeah, so it's around about 30. It's around about 32. We've got 28 that should be on the run, plus a number of spares, training appliance, and some others. Within that, we've got two what we call carts. There are aerial platforms, but they also sort of double up as a normal fire appliance as well, and something that we would like to replace in the future when we possibly can. Listen. It's tight. If we had 28 of our stations available as such, it is tight, but we will make sure that those appliances are on the run.
Andre.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Rob, and a question also to the Commissioner. I think it's a brilliant result, and I have to say that absolutely superb in terms of also coinciding with the governance change. That couldn't be better. There was also clearly interest in the dynamic crewing response, as we know. It's absolutely crucial for a growing county, and therefore the future planning also in terms of where our communities are going, and those developments around our towns, and obviously embedding that plan of resilience is really important going further, because clearly our risks change and the community changes accordingly. So that capital programme is essential to obviously tie into locations of stations and communities obviously around them. And I think we should really be quite cognizant of the fact that that has to change obviously for the future going.
Anita.
So far, we have indicated the position of Northamptonshire needs. Where do you see your position of Northampton compared to, say, our nearest neighbours? Do you benchmark yourself? For instance, do you know nationally where is your position of Northamptonshire?
Yes, we benchmark on a regular basis. We benchmark with a family group, which is services of similar size. We also benchmark nationally, I think, as per the police and every public authority through SIPFA. We sit predominantly, I suppose, in the middle of most. Whatever we're looking at, response times. In fact, response times, we are fairly high with regard to our response times of other services. With regard to availability, I think we're very middle of the road. But I don't think you'll find many services who are very different from us in that respect. Just to sort of make the point, though, that we are one of the cheapest fire and rescue services within this country as such. So in that regard, and of course, it was also brought up in the Tranche 2 report that the 2 services up in Northumberland that we're extremely tight with regard to finances, and we're doing very well what we did with our finance. And if anybody took any more money out of Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service, we probably wouldn't be able to deliver. So again, it's something I can bring to into another board, but we do sort of do extremely well with regard to our benchmarking groups.
Winston.
I'll be very quick, Chair. During our difficult period, we had to decommission, during our difficult period, we had to decommission or mothball RTCVs. Have we brought them back into service?
Sorry, the initial intervention vehicles, Councillor, is that?
No, the what we call the road traffic collision vehicles. We had to mothball or decommission. I think at least a couple of them. Have we brought them back into service? Because
So what we have are two things there. We have rural response vehicles, which is what I believe you're talking about, Councillor. But we also have our initial intervention vehicles, where one person, a community risk group watch manager, can go out and deal with it, or safely respond to an RTC and make it safe before appliances come. They haven't been mothballed, they are still in use. The only thing that we did stop doing was something that was, it was very early on in our collaboration agenda with Northamptonshire Police, where we had a rural vehicle going out with one police officer and one firefighter within that rural vehicle. That model as such didn't necessarily suit either Northamptonshire Police or Northamptonshire Fire Service. But it's not to say we've discounted that completely. We're still on that collaboration agenda and just finding a different way to do that. And all that did as such was go around and deliver messages into rural areas. We haven't stopped delivering that message into rural areas, be it police or fire.
Commissioner, did you want to... sorry, Richard, I didn't see.
Thank you, Chair. It was just something, with regard to the age of your assets, is there a correlation between them breaking down on deployment, or does that just not figure in your equations with regard to when they are called for breaking down en route? And is there a correlation, does it happen, and is it correlated with the age of your engine?
Does it happen? Very infrequently. I've known it to happen probably 2 or 3 times. We did have an appliance that lost its oil in Wellingborough, but it wasn't responding to an incident.
Sorry, 2 or 3 times, what, a year?
No. Sorry. No. Again, I'm talking. I shouldn't talk figures. I'm not entirely sure of the figures, but no. Very minimally. In fact, I'm not aware. I'd have to go back and get those figures. Now, is it directly related to the age of the appliances? If that did happen, very possibly. They're very old appliances as such. We do need a new fleet. We've said this, we need a new fleet, and that's what we're working towards. But then again, the vehicles are serviced as they should be, they're maintained as they should be. But as we know, costs go up when you maintain older vehicles.
It was just, I just wondered whether that was a trend, and was it increasing? If it doesn't really happen, that's
it's not a trend that we've identified. So sorry.
Ian, you just...
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What do you do in the event if you have a major fire, for example, a really big fire, and you have to send out a majority of your appliances to it? What do you do about backup?
So there are a number of things we can do with regard to backup, and again, I'll speak about one of the things we've done since we've improved our scrutiny. So every service has 13, 16 or mutual aid arrangements. They're section 13 and 16. So what we can do is call on other services, and they call on us to sit at certain fire stations if need be, or call them directly onto the incident. An example I can give is if we have an incident down in Total, the south of the county, we regularly utilise Buckinghamshire, whereas Buckinghamshire regularly utilise us for across the border. One other thing we have access to is those people whose appliances aren't available, but also are a resource that are available. So there's those on-call people who are available. So what we can do also is and again we've done it once, is sort of mobilise some people who were available as individuals, but their station wasn't available, got them all to an incident, and dealt with it that way. Again, rarely happens. We've predominantly got enough appliances to deal with a major incident. The last major incident, major incident we had here was Sywell, and we had 13 appliances there, and we dealt with that ourselves.
Commissioner, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I keep trying to take the mic back from you, Rob. I was just thinking about some kind of questions. There's a couple of points I kind of really want to make. I think first and foremost, let's thank Darren, Rob and Sean from the leadership team, but also all of the firefighters who've actually worked really hard to actually make this possible. We've announced kind of recruitment, additional people, and also the additional purchase additional vehicles. They're not on stream yet, so this is actually on the back of people working harder, smarter, and cleverer. So I really want to take this point to particularly thank them for the actual work and effort that they've have done and formally recognise that. There's a couple of things in there. We've got kind of average response times in there. Actually, the number of responses to fire continues to stay on a kind of a more stable trajectory, but actually response times for the number of volumes of RTCs has actually continued to increase, and we've seen some quite tragic ones across the county. So actually, if you dig in the detail further, by the very definition of them, fires are more likely to have occurred in our bigger urban areas where there are more people, and the RTCs tend to happen on quieter roads out in the disparate parts. So actually, below that, there's even more work that's been done, and credit should be kind of given on that one. You asked Rob a question also around response times. Actually, I use somewhere like Oxfordshire as a barometer. Actually, on and I haven't double-checked it because someone will probably prove me wrong in the last quarter, but actually I look at some of the numbers for last year, and our response times have actually been getting faster and faster, while someone like that has been static. So actually, as a comparable, we're doing well against kind of other services. But also, you asked the question there around there are some opportunities as a consequence of the services working closer together, particularly on some of these RTCs, that actually make our community safe. But, answering your question, Richard, are people safer today as a consequence of this? I would actually say yes, most definitely they are. Are they safe? I don't think we can kind of say that all the time with it in terms of risk. Are they safer? Yes. There's still more work to done. You've kind of mentioned there, and I should rob my own bit from when I talk about from a budgetary point of view. Don't underestimate the level of the challenge in front of the team. Rob, you're modest there in terms of the service is actually kind of middling and hiring some areas. I think it's the 40. It's in the bottom. It's not even the bottom quartile, the bottom 10% or something in terms of funding across the country. So actually it's doing it on the back of it. We're going to have some I don't know where we're going to find this money tree, hey Helen, but actually, you've got a requirement there, you've got engines that, and I think we've mentioned previously, are 18 years. Doesn't sound like a big thing, but also that delay of a year as a consequence of the fire service change of governance as across the 151, all those engines got a year older. There are challenges. We've had condition surveys that show that actually there's asbestos in buildings that has known to have been there but hasn't been dealt with. Now, these are all burdens that have still got to be dealt with at the same time as, if you like, as that swan serenely sails on, there's some significant kind of challenges underneath. The magnitude of capital requirement that we're looking at is the order of £22 million. That's almost the equivalent of the total budget. Large majority of that, 15 million of it is vehicles, and that doesn't even include anything for estates. We've recently had a situation, admittedly it was a training appliance, but actually, and I'll get the term wrong, but the actual one of the couplings, I don't want to say exploded, but certainly kind of shattered and fractured, and had that happened in in a dangerous situation, lives could have been put at risk. So we're on a journey. We are not out the woods yet. There's much work to do, and like I say, I want to particularly thank everybody who's involved in fire and rescue for the great work that we're doing to get us to this particular point. And thank you for coming and taking the questions today, Rob.
Thank you. I'm sure the whole panel will echo that, and thank you for your excellent work and improvements, even without pots of extra money, and but just as Stephen said, harder work, and hopefully over time those extra appliances and extra staffing will come on stream and help even more. So thank you very much. Stephen, I think, is the police performance still?
Well, I was going to say, I didn't know whether you wanted me to take questions on the panel, on the report I've given you, because I thought that was probably the best way. I'm quite happy to talk. Let's put it this way, if you don't ask me questions, I'm more than happy to talk to you about it, but I'm pretty confident with this panel that I'm going to get asked some questions.
I'm sure there'll be questions. Okay, I will start off actually. On some of the statistics, for instance, rape and sexual offences, it seems quite a low resolution to me. I mean, I don't know what the average is, but 3.7 or 6% resolution. And I just wonder whether the structural changes that you're making with greater emphasis on investigation is expected to increase those detection rates?
First of all, I should probably say that sadly the outcomes that you see there are consistent with what you would find across the country. That doesn't mean in any way anyone in Northamptonshire finds them acceptable. But actually, as you know, the government is commissioning a Royal Commission on the criminal justice. And actually, we've recently reinstigated a local criminal justice board where the judiciary, the courts, and thank you for Paul and his team on work to bring that together, because actually it's only when you start to look at the totality of it. So if I took, you talk about domestic violence, for instance, some of the time it's actually taken us to get some of these cases to court as a consequence of kind of listing, case preparation, all of those things. So there is no kind of one thing. It's a bit like you've got a whole system that everyone needs to play kind of a bigger part in. But actually, I think for a lot, as I look into the detail and kind of rape, sexual violence, is the bit that I do remember for me was quite astounding when I kind of came into office, was kind of the volume. But actually, I do want to make sure that we kind of reassure the public, because actually it's very easy to kind of look at those numbers and go, oh my God, they're quite scary. It is worth the best part of 45% of these occur within existing relationships. So that's when we talk about the focus on domestic violence, really has an impact. Whereas actually stranger rapes is something like 10%. And the reason that is also quite important is, of course, with the situation that we see in our courts and evidence and the time to get to court has meant that some of these people, if you're also in a relationship, then actually it's one word against another, and also there is then the possibility that someone actually retracts something or discontinuance. So it's something that we monitor. One of the things you'll find as we get into the data, there's even more data I can provide you with around other stuff. And there probably is some bit that we should take some time at some time, probably annually, that we give you kind of a detailed analysis of some. So we've recently added a performance analyst in our own team to make sure that we really are digging under it, to make sure that we can kind of look at the impact on some of those, because it's not just around policing. My title is Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, so it's also making sure that we hold other bodies to account to make sure that we kind of manage some of those. I think it was a long answer for a short question, which I apologise.
Winston, I think you're first.
Yes, Commissioner, I'm really concerned about on page 24, 3.5, reference to knife crime. I'm concerned about that, and I would really like to know what are we doing about it? What is the police, Northamptonshire Police, doing to help reduce knife crime, at least reduce knife crime?
34%.
Yeah. Just saying that knife crime is on the increase to me is not good enough.
I'm just going to... Oh, it doesn't turn yours off. There's kind of two parts to that. The one I do want to reassure, bearing in mind any offence is something we wouldn't want to see. We are talking 627 offences. That doesn't mean that a knife was used. It means it may have been there. And again, I'm happy to provide further breakdown, but I could provide, for instance, and I haven't got the exact number, but I know I could demonstrate that for instance, half of those could easily be where a knife was present in a domestic violence situation. So I don't want this one that lots of people are walking around with knives in the pocket. They most definitely, there are some signs of that. But we're not going to solve that by just policing. There is, yes, a better use of stop and search, but as you and I have also talked about, appropriate use of stop and search. And I probably quote the Chief of Chiefs this weekend. The only way you're actually going to solve this is you can't enforce your way out of it, is actually through prevention and early intervention. So, you know, the youth service that we've got coming on stream at the end of this month, getting involved and making sure kids don't get excluded. You know, I'm minded of one particularly, that a school that I met in Kettering, and I used that example, I won't name the school, where a child was excluded and the next day he showed up on social media, and I wouldn't call it a knife, I think it was kind of, it wasn't quite a sword, but it was of that kind of magnitude, because it's only actually by keeping those kids engaged and constrained that we can actually do it. I'm more than happy to provide you kind of more detail that's been done. But the first thing I kind of want to issue, bearing in mind that we have something like 260,000 offences a year, of which is 60,000 crimes, you're still talking around a relatively small small number, but that doesn't mean that it's not being taken serious on all level. And like I said, there's a number of things that are done both in prevention and also appropriate enforcement as well. And I think, you know, one of the ones you'd talk to me about is what was going on in the town centre. So actually we've been trialling in the run-up to Christmas a kind of a greater visibility, a lower tolerance to kind of low-level drug dealing, and trying to make the streets safer. And I think some of you might have got lost in the general election, but as a consequence of some great work Northamptonshire Police has done, over 150 people were arrested in a 4-week period in the crackdown act, because they're not carrying knives for the sake of it. It's around safety, it's also around actually other crimes that are kind of going on. So I'm comfortable we're going in the right direction in terms of enforcement, but we are by no means there yet.
Can I just follow up on that one, because you had this Home Office money for the special sort of extra sort of helping to prevent knife crime, and I believe that comes to an end in March, and you said in the report that you were looking into possibly extending that. I mean, have you found that effective? So this was the £627,000 that Nikki and the Falls got to support it. It was originally for 16 months, I think, was the funding, 15 months. We have found the money, and it will be going on for another year, because I think that means we've got about, is it 12 or 14 months left? I'm trying to think of the original.
It'll run through to the end of March 2021.
Yeah, and that's very much our serve team. Some of you may have seen some of the work and some of the posters about It's Never Too Late, about trying to extract kids who are on the edge of gangs and or involvement in it. That's obviously something we're independently assessing. I know they've dealt with several hundred cases. At some point we'll be determining its success, and it undoubtedly has had some successes, but there also will be lessons to learn and or improvements that can be made. I suppose if I wanted to try and take anecdotal, some of you may have come to the call-in that we do where there's some, let's call it an educational piece for some of those people. Thames Valley, big force next door to us, was so impressed with our model that they're actually trying to take it and lift it themselves. That in no way means that there is not improvements that we can or can't make. But actually, you know, that's a good endorsement that we're moving in the right direction. But as Nikki said, extended to March of 21, and we will assess it independently to make sure it is. Home Office will assess in conjunction with us to make sure it's successful. Because, you know, and if it means that we don't carry on with it, doesn't mean it's success. Are there other lessons, and it needs to become mainstream, if you like, or it may be. But you will also have noticed that the subsequent to this, the government gave, I think it was money for 18 violence reduction units, and so lessons that can kind of be learned from us. So it'll be something that we're all kind of looking at. But I fundamentally believe that you can only solve these problems by preventing and intervention. You can't enforce your way out of it. What are you actually doing in terms of, like I say, engagement with kids, educational? Those are the things that are going to make the difference.
Thank you. Anita.
Yes, I have got two questions. One is to do with sexual offences against children. Now, you said on your table, comparison with peers up to September 2019 not available. Does it mean that your peers do not want to reveal the statistic? Because I can't believe that they do not have similar problems. It shows that it is stabilizing, but you have an increase year on year, 28.6%. So I just would like to know, whilst you say that it's stabilizing, what you're doing about that. And then also on the modern slavery and human trafficking. Now, the year-on change is 220%. Whilst, again, you're making a comment, comparison with peers, significantly below regional peers, but you've got an upwards trend. So, again, on that one, I just would like to see, because modern slavery and human trafficking can also have children on it. I would like to see what your comment on those two. Thank you.
There's two parts to this. Sexual offences against children is probably the one against the peers. I don't know, and I'll take it away and I'll come back to you on that one. I think the bit that is complicated in this is there's quite a large percentage of historic. You'll probably see today there was a report out that I can't remember what one of the MPCC lead was saying that related to some of these historic cases is costing policing the order of £250 million a year, and there's a lot of one. And by the very definition, they're quite timely and take some time to come out. I actually don't have for you the breakdown of what's historic and thingy, and I think that would probably be beneficial. I'm always going to be happy to provide questions, but I did highlight that this was exactly what was going to happen to this meeting. It would become a scrutiny of what was going to go on with these numbers, and this is not. These are what I hold the force to account against it. On the modern slavery and human trafficking, it might sound odd this. I'm very pleased with the increase in those numbers, because actually as a consequence of reporting. I do remember, and I don't think it was anyone on this panel, but I do remember someone questioning me when I put it in my police and crime panel and said, you know, modern slavery and human trafficking doesn't occur in this county or doesn't exist, does it? Quite clearly, as you can see, it does. Actually, the significance, Paul has led some great work in terms of education with a variety of businesses to actually, and other organisations to actually educate them on the risk that they actually provide. Quite happy to provide it, but I think and obviously any sexual offence against children is abhorrent, but there is also a high percentage of them that are actually kind of historic.
Andre.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A couple of points, really. Firstly, on 3.3, very reassuring to see that gun crime, I know we're not complacent, but gun crime is on the significant reduction. It is something, obviously, which we all are very concerned about, the influences from other countries and the availability of weapons, particularly guns in our community. That's good to hear that they are. The reduction of crime has been 35% in terms of reported areas. On 3.5, just come back to knife crime if I can. It's something obviously that clearly affects from a national perspective, but comes down to haunt us on a local level. Can I ask two questions? One, how many of these offences were carried out by children? And that's over 1,000 incidents here we've got, because obviously 627 offences have been recorded in the last 12 months where a knife was used during the commissioning of the offence, it says here. Is that a typo, or is that accurate, the word commissioning? It does seem a rather unusual word to use, and clearly there's a significant increase there. The other point being that clearly there were 403 knife possession offences recorded. These clearly are those that have been recorded, and quite clearly there are so many more that we're aware of. Can I congratulate the force in tackling this? It's a very difficult position to be in, I'm sure, an officer to an individual carrying a knife. Not only are they sometimes themselves not really well equipped to tackle that, and many of them do carry truncheons and clearly not much more than that, although things are being rolled out, as we know, and I'm pleased to see that. It does also concern me maybe that in the response to that, if I may ask, and there was a sort of brief comment later on the report in terms of tasers and the fact that some officers come and join the force from previous backgrounds such as other forces and from the military where they have been given certificates for clearly being trained competently in the use of taser, but they're not able to carry a taser in this force. Can I ask why that condition still applies? And that would obviously help our community be safer if they're given tools to tackle those areas.
I think I can remember all of those questions. The first one, I would just remind, I mentioned the 150 arrests that I kind of mentioned. That was a joint operation in conjunction with the Metropolitan Police Force. And part of the reason of it is actually, and I've talked about it before, and also it's the reason that I very firmly believe Northamptonshire is kind of underfunded. Our proximity between Birmingham and London is slap bang in the middle with real good routes. A number of years ago, the force did a great piece of work over in kind of Wellingborough and kind of cleared out the local gangs that kind of created a vacuum that then got filled with if I might say, a more robust or nastier elements that have come from different places. So most definitely they, just by clearing them out doesn't solve a particular problem. You mentioned particularly around kind of taser. The Chief Constable has to carry the risk and make sure that anyone he's got is kind of trained in is an appropriate area. And you know the force has been on very much on the front foot in terms of saying that it would equip, and it was very much there in terms of deterrent. I think actually, and the Chief has come under pressure from other chiefs, if I might say, around them kind of going, well, I'm not sure what we kind of wanted to do that and force them to ask difficult decisions. Each Chief Constable has to have responsibility for his staff and make those decisions appropriately. There are some stuffs that I genuinely do think, and it's a bit lateral, but bear with me, around vetting. Vetting is actually not done nationally. You know, you've got a police officer that joins our force from another. They have to be re-vetted because the Chief Constable carries it. Now, personally, I think that's absurd. I think there should be a national vetting department and all of these things. And I think there are some standards, and I sit on the College of Policing. Taser is also another one. There should be national standards, probably even national trainers to make sure that they're done, and they shouldn't be done 43 times. I think as part of the national uplift, as some of the Commission, there is a genuine recognition that now as we look to the future for policing, some of these difficult questions are being asked and thought about rather than kind of what I would call kind of this silo bunker mentality that's kind of how can I squeeze, you know, another couple of pence out of that pound. Thank you.
Sorry.
How many offences were carried out by the children?
I don't know that, but I'll get it and I'll provide it to the
helpful.
We'll get an age break. I think what we're looking for, and I am going to ask you all to be careful. I knew this is what would happen. We would go down that borough and say, and we will not, you will not, you do your job, which is holding me to account, to hold the chief to account. So I would ask you, and I think Paul wants to make a point. And also, whether there was a knife in the pocket or not.
I think Stephen Zoe just pointed out the thing that we have to bear in mind is that we're holding, checking that he's holding the Chief Constable to account. So I'd just like to ask you, how do you feel that your priorities for policing and community safety, how do you think you, what the progress is of delivery of that, bearing in mind this is coming towards the end of your tenure?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for a lovely easy question there. I can undoubtedly sit here and say I genuinely believe that Northamptonshire Police has made progress, quite a lot of it more lately, if you like, under the new leadership team that we have in Northamptonshire Police in terms of attitude. But I don't want to let anyone be under any illusion. We're not where we need to be yet. There is a lot of work being done, a lot of very hard working and dedicated people. It's great we're recruiting these new police officers, but actually our percentage of police officers that have been with the force for under 3 years continues to escalate towards the high 40s. Now, of course, that's a very high percentage of kind of new talent. You know, Councillor Gonzalez mentioned kind of people joining. Part of it is the feeling that's being created about Northamptonshire Police is one that attracts. Now, that means there is a better feeling in there, it's starting to do better. Is that finding its way down to the public in quite the way I would like in all instances? I don't think it is. I don't think the quality of service, the actual outcomes for victims is what I would want to see. And I suppose that is reiterated in some respects for me by kind of HMIC, FRS and their independent reports, and also mine I've got. Do I actually think it's getting better? I absolutely do. Do I think it's where I would like it to be, or where you or public would like it to be? No, but I genuinely think we're making progress. Yeah, and burglary on this report is a good example. You know, we're potentially going to fall out the bottom of our our profile of success that's kind of being made there. Now, that takes time, and I suppose one of the things that I want to make sure to see is that they are sustained. You know, I think I've likened it this way: Northamptonshire Police has had a very good record. When it focuses on something, it has success. One of the things it needs to make sure it does, and HMIC would back this up, it needs to make sure, and I kind of liken it this way: it's like going into a darkened room and putting a flashlight in a particular corner. The focus moves to that area, and actually success is achieved. It can't be like that. You've got to go in, you've got to turn the whole light on, and you've got to deal with everything. And actually, there are still some basic things that we are not getting right at the standards that I think the force should do. However, I'm very encouraged that each month that I see steps forward in the right direction. And I think what will probably be quite helpful is the new analytics that we've got that actually measures each of the metrics and the priorities to actually give me the confidence. Probably won't be able to show you it because I think we'll spend the whole of the next one talking about budgets in February, but we'll perhaps give you some more insight into that for the kind of March one, because I think what would probably be more helpful is if you can see the tools that I use to hold the force to account around its performance. So perhaps we'll set that one. And there may even be that we can have Madam Chairman, it's up to you, a private session that we talk through in a bit more detail, get someone from the force to be able to answer some of those questions, and then you can get some of the same feeling I do, and you can draw comfort, or not, as the case may be, from that.
I think we also need to bear in mind, as you just pointed out, that we have 3 meetings sort of in quick succession this year, and obviously one major on the budget, but you know, we have got other opportunities to pursue some of these. So with that in mind, can we make it quick, Richard, and then we'll move on to the next topic? Okay. Sorry, missed you.
It goes back to something that Councillor Mercer talked about. It's about the sort of positively resolved detection rates, specifically around violence, crime and domestic violence. Now, violent crime, invariably the offender is in front of you, so there is a lot of evidence gathered, hence the reason why I suppose we detect more of those than we do other crime types. But in domestic violence, not only can you identify the offender, the offender is normally known. We know the name of the person either lives with or cohabitates with the individual, has some sort of relationship. I think the figures are disappointed, and I'm not too sure whether that is something that it probably has been historic. And I'm just wondering, can you comment on, with the Northamptonshire-wide domestic abuse strategy, is there somehow the enforcement side, because of course it is a very, very complicated issue, going to be linked into that to try to increase the positive resolutions and the positive actions, and also trying to speed up the justice system specifically for those who are subject to domestic abuse. I'm wondering whether you can any comment on how that area is going to progress. And do you have a particular target in mind as to where you would like to see domestic violence and the resolutions and detections to get to? That's the first point. Thank you.
There's kind of two parts to that. As you can kind of see, the number of, in the very first instance, it might sound odd, I'm very pleased that we're talking about domestic violence, to get it to this particular point kind of on the agenda, in the same way that I sort of said modern slavery. You know, there was a councillor not in this room who said to me, well, domestic violence doesn't occur where I live, does it? And that was at the beginning of my tenure. As you can see, something like 16,000 incidents across the last 12 months. Now, there are a mixture of things that we're doing. Education, whether I use the, some of you may have seen, we did the thing with beauty practitioners on the back of someone going to Norwich to actually encourage both in terms of support, because actually you might think, well, when you're having particularly ladies, because as you've seen from mine, it doesn't take very long for her to cut my hair, but when you're actually having your hair cut, women tend to disclose, because the number of I can't think of the right term now. The number of offences, if you like, is predominantly as a consequence of men on women. So actually, some work we were doing with those, and actually, I want to see that expanded. What are other areas in terms of other people to see? And a good example of that is, you know, if someone's going to see their GP, actually, are they being abused? And that's the reason that they're asking in terms of medication. So the more we actually talk about it, do these numbers scare the living daylights out of me and keep me awake? They most definitely do. But actually, as you've already said under there, Richard, it's only through a joined-up approach are we going to solve this, and actually everyone recognising they're playing their part. You know, and this is why things like, you know, what are we doing about our ACE caseworkers working with families to kind of identify some of the work we've got around kind of our perpetrator programme and conditional cautions that we've got kind of in the county. Like I said, the educational piece that we're actually doing, there are a number of measures that we all need to make sure that we kind of do and work together on, because that's the only way. So I actually also firmly believe, and I know some would feel some pain as to how they kind of got there, the new unitaries, I think, provides us kind of with a real opportunity to all work that bit closer together, because essentially at the moment you've got the county council responsible for safeguarding, and then actually the ability to deal with their housing at their most basic needs is dealt with from the borough. So actually the connection between the two is a real opportunity for us as a county, and that's why the strategy at the right time and us talking about it is a real positive thing. And I suppose in answer to that, it will always be very high in my police and crime plan. I dream of a day that it's not going to be there, but I don't see that anytime soon. One of the things of working with some of the things around the children and young people that we've also talked about from a prevention, that's going to stop them being involved. So if we can stop kids being involved in families where it goes on, and too many of these actually have young children present where domestic violence is going on, means that they're less likely to go on to be the perpetrators of tomorrow. And that's not an enforcement, that's what a joined up approach with us, with schools, with education, and all of these things together. So in some respects, I want us to keep talking about it, and I'm thankful for, you know, you keep asking me what I'm going to do about it, and I'll keep making sure that we apply pressure to force, but also to partners and across criminal justice. You know, I use I met with the judiciary recently, and actually one of the things that they've been doing in Aylesbury, one of your old haunts when you were in TVP, was actually the judge there said, every domestic violence case I want to see in my court in 6 weeks. that has actually meant that people who plead has shot up. Things like now we've got mandatory body-worn video camera on all of our police officers that are being shared, means that pictures, videos are being shown and prosecutions will go up. But only if we can get those listed in court in a short period of time, because actually, you know, we've some terrible instances and not apportioning blame where you've got people, and I monitor it through Voice Our Victim service, the best part of 2 years before a case gets there. Well, to be honest, you're just going to want to move on with your life, and you can completely understand that. So that's not a short answer, but we continue to require that joined up approach. But also, that, you know, the force has also done some really good work through its DAPIT team, as actually under Claire's law, they've had what I would call assertive outreach, where if someone is a serial perpetrator of domestic violence, they will go and visit the new girlfriend and explain to her some of the things, you know. And I even have an instance where someone said, I can't get a girlfriend in this county anymore, I'm going to go somewhere else. Now, whilst that's great for Northamptonshire, we still haven't solved the problem, have we? We've just moved that problem on to somewhere else. And that's why also the unpalatable piece here really is, do you know what? We've got to work with perpetrators to reform them. So it's no good, you know, let's stop it in the first place, let's robustly enforce, but what can we do with perpetrators to actually make sure that we educate them and show them the kind of the error of their ways? You've got to deal with all three elements.
Thank you. And my second point was, I did have 2 points. Killed and seriously injured. It was just really a question about, I don't know the detail of those fatalities. We do understand generally that it is speed that kills, but is there any thoughts with regard to the police recommissioning or the static speed cameras, or is there any evidence that would suggest that the recommissioning of them would actually decrease on the fatalities? Just your thoughts on that area, sir.
Again, I love coming here for the nice, easy questions. I think the first thing I kind of want to reassure is, you know, none of us find the numbers of our killed and serious injured on our roads. You know, it's a shocking amount. I do want everyone to appreciate that it's a phenomenally small percentage of the number of vehicles that are on our roads every day. You know, we've got something like 100 AMPR cameras, and those are circulated around the county, and those monitor something like 1.3 million movements. So actually, when you've got 2,500 miles of roads with several hundred vehicles going down it kind of at any one time. In answer to your question, sorry, and I just want to finish up on, we look very carefully in terms of the patterns and to see, and is there a discernible pattern that we can recognise that's kind of making a difference? And sadly, there isn't. But actually, particularly under Paul's leadership, there is a really good piece of work being done now with the, and I shall forget the constituents, so feel free to chime in. A number of partners, which is County Council, Highways, Police, Fire, who are actually all working together to drive a strategy. Because again, we've talked about it before, it's only through partnership can we kind of make that difference. So if things change need to be made to roads, to work and look together what we can do to bring those down. On the question of the cameras, it's not one I've actually got an opinion. It's something we're actually considering right now. Because actually, I think if I was trying to put it, it would be average speed cameras, I think, would be a better than actually kind of static. So if you're asking me for a position, I don't favour bringing static cameras back into operation. However, I do think there's probably some certain cases where the average speed would generally kind of be a benefit. Paul, I don't know if there's anything you want to kind of add to that.
I'd say, excuse my voice, I'd say currently the focus is around working drivers, young drivers and mature drivers. By mature I mean 60 plus, because there is some evidence that shows that they are a significant, either a contributory factor or more at risk of being injured. I echo Stephen's comments around speed cameras. There has been a provisional piece of work done around that. If anybody was to recommission static cameras, the static camera sites that were in place a decade ago when they were shut down are no longer in the right place. So it wouldn't be a case of simply In fact, you couldn't actually just switch on the cameras because they used to have old-fashioned filming them. You'd have to put them elsewhere. So I'd echo Stephen's view. If anybody was to do that, the right way to do it would be to, in my opinion, and the evidence would tend to suggest average speed cameras rather than static, because static work at that particular point in time once. There is some evidence that at some of our sites, you know, people will slow down. They slow down for 100 yards and then they rapidly accelerate. So I'm happy to have a conversation with you outside to explain in more detail what we're doing as a strategic road safety partnership, but it's starting to have some results. Okay.
And just on that, if anyone, you know, there are a number of things that we commission. If anyone's interested in it, happy to invite you along, whether it be our car craft thing that we do at Silverstone for young drivers to actually educate them. We've also done some work with the advanced motoring to actually make sure that, and that's proceeds of crime money that's actually gone to actually educating young people about kind of being safer on the roads. I was very proud, Mum, I won't embarrass her, who said to us, well, you can't have that car unless you go on it, because the normal cost of doing it is something like £140, and through a subsidy from us they've managed to get it down to 40 advanced motorists. But I'd also say actually there's work we're doing at the younger end. Sadly, Richard, I'm going to put me and you in that category, but actually it's people like us at the other end, if you like, that also need to be. Yeah, I think we're still too young to be in that category, but we're hurtling towards it, I'm afraid, if you like. We're certainly not in the young category anymore, but there is some good work that's kind of being done, and that's why sometimes a shame we don't have enough time together, you know, for me to take you through some of those.
It's reassuring that you are, you know, actually looking at that. Anyway, Anita.
Yes, just a quick return to the domestic abuse. Now, I have been among some other councillors here to Sunflower House, and also I have been told by yourself about all the good work of LOAF program. Are these two programs, especially Sunflower, contributory to the decrease year-on-year change to your domestic abuse program? Because I thought it was a brilliant idea on both cases, Sunflowers and LOAF. And I would just like to know if these two programs will still carry on, i.e. budget-wise. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. It's sometimes I come here and no one asks me about the good news. It's always the thingy one. I can only commend the work that, you know, both Voice is doing, and we've been doing some. And these are a kind of boring but important work. You know, Sunflower has been supported by the county council, some of the boroughs. Health and myself in terms of partnership. We've been doing some work to make sure it integrates better with Voice and put it on a firmer footing so that we're actually able to guarantee that it goes on in the future. So I can personally assure you of my deep-seated commitment to make sure that we do it. But part of its strength is it works in conjunction with everyone else. The Good Loaf, you quite rightly have mentioned, we've got some funding, and Paul and his team has done some work to make sure we kind of got another one up there in terms of Kettering now. And you're right, those are results, and those are both helping to prevent, but also kind of in terms of remedial. Thankfully, they're a charity, and some of the work that we're doing, they're all working, and there are other stuff kind of going on. And Madam Chairman's looking at me to say, can I hurry up, because I think we need to move on.
Thank you very much. You got my look.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yes, if we could just move on then to the next.
Before we do, Chair, just sorry, in the interest of clarity, what I was picking up as the outcomes from that discussion were 2 points of information. The committee asked for an age breakdown of knife crime offences, with the caveat that won't be completely precise, and confirmation of why no peer information was available on sexual offences against children. And then, as a further possible point, you mentioned earlier in the discussion that you were sure the panel would endorse the progress in performance being made in relation to the Fire and Rescue Service, whether that is to be translated into a conclusion by the panel as a whole. or remains an individual comment.
As always, James picks up the points very well. I certainly commend the fire services, as he just said. But those other 2 points as well, I think, certainly worth pushing forward for. So, with that, if we could move on to item 7, the structure of your office.
That sounds slightly more grander than it is, but I was going to say I'll talk to that. Today's report provides an update in relation to both the changes to the structure of my office and the development of enabling services, both cover the force and the fire and rescue service. As you see from the report, they are closely linked, and we've learnt a great deal over the last 12 months. I would particularly like to take and thank at this moment in time Martin Scoble, who's gone to, I believe, a well-remunerated, exciting opportunity. And I thank him particularly for the work he did with me at the very start of my kind of tenure to bring stability to the office and the team, and we wish him all of the best with his exciting new opportunity. But it did, of course, you tasked me with saying a year in, would I come back with a report to the panel about the office structure. So I thought, well, actually, with him leaving, and there's 2 parts of that. As you know, he was seconded from my office to lead us forth on the enabling services front. We have made good progress there, and we will be shortly out for recruitment formally for that post for someone to actually head up enabling services, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But it also made me reflect on, I would formally if you like, pick up rather than run as a trial the changes that I had made to my office. And those were around the changing of responsibilities, particularly with Paul Borland and Nicky Marzak, around the monitoring officer, and also I had a secondment of Simon Clifford to the police ICT, which Paul took on more responsibility. I'm formally saying I'm adopting that structure, I'm keeping it, and there's 2 reasons I'm keeping it. One, I'm a greedy son, so I'm enjoying saving the money, and I want to pass that 150,000 that we will save on the structure changes that we've done on to the force and the fire and rescue service to enable the employment of a senior person for the enabling services. But also, I've found it to be, both as a team, us more effective, more fleet of foot, and kind of better outcomes. So taking those into effect, I'm formally picking that one up, and will no longer be a trial, and formally appointing those to that. But if I now may talk briefly about enabling services, or as I often call it, purple. As I said, there will always be red, there will always be blue, but what can we do in terms of purple? I will probably talk a little bit more about this when we get to perhaps some of the estates and some of the things that hopefully we'll get a chance, depending on time, at the next meeting to cover. But there's some real opportunities. We talked there around kind of fleet. The fleet is currently managed in 2 different parts of the county. Some of the HR is managed by a mixture of LGSS. Some of it is on behalf of fire, managed by MFSS up in Cheshire for the police service, finance teams. Some of it's in my office, some of it's in the police. So actually there is a real opportunity to bring these areas together. I actually think in the short term they'll probably cost me a little bit more money, but I genuinely believe it will create a more efficient, if I might put enabling or support services under enabling both police and fire to, if you like, focus on the day job in terms of the outcomes. And just to put that in perspective, of as I stray off into budgets, from a policing point of view, next year's budget, well, actually, we'll deal with this year's, is that for the police is £130 million, not an insignificant amount of sum. The enabling services part of that is around 23 from a policing point of view. So that's £110 million worth of, if I might unit that term, copying and efficient, and I want to make sure that that's driven. Oh, bless you, Helen. That doesn't mean I got a number wrong, does it? It wasn't the code, was it? I was saying, no, I've got a number wrong. To make sure that from a policing point of view, we focus on those areas, and I want to thank both the chiefs and both services for the embracing of making sure that we kind of share services where we can, and that will mean some resources that are outside of the county coming back in, and will better enable the both services to focus on those elements. So things like ICT, HR, finance, fleet, estates, all of those things which are kind of common, so that will also make it easier to manage those different elements. So we're looking for a senior leader to come in and manage that, and that recruitment process. I was about to say, when I wrote the report, we're starting in the new year. I don't think it's quite started yet, but we're looking to. And obviously the funding of that post will be doesn't affect any frontline, because we've made the savings, if you like, in my office to pass them on, which should then better enable both chief officer teams to focus on I'm not saying the more important part of the job. I'm not implying the enabling services aren't important, because without being rude, without any vehicles to travel to any of these things, or without any staff being paid, nothing is going to get done. So it means that hopefully it then tightens up and enables of that. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Could I just clarify then, you say there's a new role of the Enabling Services Project Director, but you also mentioned the 2 new joint ACOs. So are there 3 posts?
Sorry, which 2 ACOs? Is this something
Paragraph 6.4. Going forward, the 2 chiefs now have a new joint ACO who will lead our shared purple services functions.
No, it's just one person. It's essentially, in their structures, they see them as assistant chief officers. It's the same person. It's one person, not 3. That's why, forgive me on the confusion. I'm like, hey, someone's trying to slip something under there.
So the financial implications of this, presumably, as you said, that you're seeing a saving.
Broadly, and that's, I think the important thing is from an operational budget, there's no change, because essentially through the directors that are around me working harder, I will share a little bit with them, of course, that the monetary saving that they're making will be passed on, if you like, to that new post to enable us to kind of drive forward purple, so it doesn't affect kind of any operation. Might even be a little bit left over for a bit of a police officer or a fire officer, but their mandate really is then to make sure that we bring those services together. And part of the reason for that is, I think, over probably the last 10 years, both for police and fire, in the desire to make sure that frontline police and firefighters didn't get any resource taken away, it's tended to be the kind of enabling services and kind of back office. And I actually think in both instances, and I use IT as perhaps a good example of that, some of the risks that the different organisations have been carrying have meant that we really have made it quite tight and asked perhaps too much of them. So actually, by reorganising, bringing some of the bits that are outsourced back in the county, it creates some real opportunity to make sure that they serve the people of Northamptonshire and better enable, if you like, our frontline firefighters and frontline police officers.
I think Martin's first.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the report. I'm not a great micromanager, but I think we should fully support this report and the structure that the Commissioner is recommending. And of course, Unitary gives us a brilliant opportunity to actually carry on the good work that we've done and progress so far. And of course, the Commissioner is going to the public in 122 days in exactly the same way as the...
Thank you for that kind reminder.
Yeah, it did. You know, I've got a countdown.
Can I borrow your clock?
And I don't usually single out particular members of the staff, but just a word about Nikki, how important that role is about early intervention, because everything we've discussed, the way that we can actually make big impacts is on early intervention and changing people's lifestyles. That's why that role is really, really important. So with that, and Stephen knows I have a concern about the estate, and I think we can save a lot of money around our estate, both as far as the police and fire is concerned, but also as far as our councils are concerned, as we, as we go on this journey. So that's where I think we work really well together, and I think we should fully support this report and that's been put in front of us.
Thank you for those words, Anita.
Just for clarification, Stephen, as you know, I like good clarification, especially on this topic. Enabling services. Now, Martin Scobble's decision to leave our organisation to take up a new role. What do you mean exactly? Do you mean leaving the organisation of enabling services, or is staying?
No, he has an exciting new job opportunity that he has been approached for. He has taken that. We're very sorry he's going, but it then meant, he's left. I think his last day he's handing his equipment in today. He has an exciting one. I'm sure he's being paid. I hope he's got a good pay rise out of it, and I wish him the very best. I am sorry he's going, and that's why we're out recruiting, which we would have had to have done anyway. I had kind of transferred him over there, if you like, to enable us to kind of get to this point. The case has been proven. People agree with that we should do purple, and that's why we're now going out formally to appoint to that post.
Thank you.
Oh, pleasure.
Any other questions on this report? Otherwise,
just to say in answer to Martin's, you are right. In the same way that enabling services has been underinvested in for a number of years, so has both the police and the fire estate. We will be trying to take the opportunity, as I'm trying to do, is for us not only to lay the foundation of the right culture for the coming years, but also that we have an estate strategy, and I particularly commend Paul Bullen for his really great work in this area, to actually lay a foundation that says, right, we're going to make an estate that's fit for purpose, that people want to work in, and do it. But I've got some commercially sensitive stuff that's going on at the moment, and hopefully come February I can provide you with some more and exciting news around, but I should contain my enthusiasm for it, because Helen will kick me otherwise.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that. Could we just note the report? Is everyone happy to note the report with the comments that Martin Griffiths said, that we commend it and look forward to seeing how it pans out in the future?
Sorry, through you, Chair. You do need to be clear whether you are noting it or whether you are endorsing it. I mean,
okay.
for what it's worth, an endorsement from the panel on this may be welcomed by the Commissioner, although he can go ahead and do it whether the panel endorses it or not. But again, the point endorsing it was made by an individual panel member. That doesn't automatically become a conclusion by the panel as a whole, unless the panel decides it is.
Is the panel happy to endorse that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I like it. It's a tough job. I like all the endorsement I can get, so thank you very much.
So we pass on to the complaint system.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Today's report provides further update into relation to the changes to the police complaint system, which are due to be implemented next month. I think, Rob, are you going to go and, you've got probably some important work you go and do, okay. Okay. I think you've got... as the report sets out, the Police and Crime Act 2017 has broadened the definition of the role and has given the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner a much greater role and oversight of the police complaint system. I obviously thank them very much for this extra work that's coming my way. My office has undertaken a huge amount of work to prepare for this change, and I'm confident that we will have the knowledge, skills and structures in place to ensure that the new complaint system will be introduced in a seamless and efficient manner. There has been some changes in the regulation since the paper was published in relation to the recommendations that the PFC can make to the force, which was set out in 5.1. Currently being handed round is the new recommendations. I used to be able to make 4 or 5 recommendations. I can make 8 recommendations now. I'm also joined by Paul Fell, and if there's any difficult questions, I'm going to let him answer them. But I think I just want to kind of manage expectations. You know, I talked about the office saving also there. This was in addition to those changes that we had made. The team is actually now complete, is hired and is ready to go on the 1st of February. We were slightly nervous about the general election, whether this would kind of get in. I think it's not unfair to say that by the very nature of the fact that in between writing the report to you and putting it, some more guidance and change kind of come out. It wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't continue to evolve. I actually genuinely believe, and I thank Paul and his team, and particularly would cite Emily, for the really good work that has been done. Obviously ably assisted by Stuart, I don't want him getting offended either, to actually make sure that we're in a place. But all of that was done in, you know, all of these changes that we brought in terms of office and structure. That is an additional team of 3 people that are actually going to reduce the burden on the force. But actually, what do we expect that to probably look like? Because how some of the... We probably expect a 5-fold increase in complaints. Now, this is not a 5-fold increase in dissatisfaction with Northamptonshire Police. The previous definition was a complaint had to be against a particular officer around a piece of conduct. The definition has changed such to the point it is any form of dissatisfaction with Northamptonshire Police, and that can be from the time it took you to answer my phone, the words you used in your communication. So the modelling we've done around of some of the stuff that's been kind of triaged and dealt with as part of a kind of a local resolution means we're expecting something, an increase of a 5-fold. There is no guarantee that this will result out in a 5-fold increase of complaints against myself and subsequently stuff that kind of comes to you. But given you know, the Commissioner's greater role, if you like, in it, I can only see that if someone doesn't get satisfaction, that stuff will probably kind of end up with yourself. But actually, I think this is really, really positive step, and I very much welcome it, because I actually think the actual openness and the confidence and the opportunity for Northamptonshire Police to both learn and the public to feel more confident is a real positive step in terms of its step forward. Happy to take any questions, or Paul, have you got anything to add on that? Probably not, but just in case. Okay.
Could I just clarify? So the PSD department will still be handling the complaints against anything other than the Chief Constable, or you will handle the Chief Constable. So you said about the 3 extra members of your team now helping the police to relieve them of some of the pressure. But is because you said there's going to be a 5-fold increase, is it not an increase to the public purse of 3 extra members of staff, basically?
There is definitely an increase to the public purse. If I was really draconian, there are probably some reciprocal savings that I might have required out of the police budget in terms of some of the efficiency that might come in terms of their kind of local resolution. Yeah, I mean, there is an additional cost that comes as a consequence of kind of dealing with complaints from the public, and you know, it's a piece of. Let's be clear, it's not a choice that we had. They had a choice of complaints and what was coming down. How we choose to respond in terms of the different options, I have chosen option 2. So if you look at the different models you've got there, you've got some of my colleagues will go with the compulsory bit, which is that they just deal with the complaints. One of the things for me that was really important, shouldn't just be about complaints. For me, it should be about what I would call the 3 C's in my mind: the compliment, comment, and complaint. So it is an opportunity for the force both to learn, but also is an opportunity for myself through the recording of the complaints in one system in conjunction with PSD, that we can hopefully locally resolve. It may, and I hope, enable the complaints team to resolve some of the stuff that's kind of going into the control room. I think there's some benefits that we will see that we can't quite see yet, but we need to, if you like, staff up on an appropriate way. Paul, is there anything you probably want to add to that? Or
I think the Professional Standards Department will still deal with the investigations in relation to misconduct of police officers, which I think would reassure you. The team, it's not 3 new people anyway, it's 2, because what we've done is reinvested 1 person that worked for me into this team in any case, just as a minor point, but there. I think the opportunity this creates that doesn't take place at the moment is it will deal with the other 2,500 issues that come into the... So, for example, there's about 120 incidents a month into the control room where people say they're not happy with the service that's been provided, that is service recovered. Now, I couldn't stand here hand on heart and tell you that they're actually service recovered to the satisfaction of the person that's complaining. Neither could I tell you that the force learns any lessons from those. That's not having a go at the force, that's just the way it is. What we want to do is to use those learnings to actually challenge the Chief Constable to say, we've picked up a pattern here of, I don't know, people from a response team showing incivility in the middle of the night to members of the public. What are we going to do about that, Chief Constable? So I think there's some of the benefits in relation to that. So actual criminal investigations or misconduct investigations will still be managed by the Force Professional Standards Department. Without getting too technical, but in a large number of those, if the finding is not found in favour of the complainant and they appeal, that appeal will be dealt with by us, not by the police service directly.
Andre, I think you were first.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I hear the point that the Commissioner has raised about the number of complaints and the anticipated increase in them, and I think they're not complaints as such, but obviously they're noted comments, probably, aren't they? And they're not, hopefully, always a negative. But there are, as we know, through social media, a tremendous amount of complaints or people use a complaining style of commentary against other officers, whether it be Chief Constable or whether it be the force, and that's any force, obviously. How will that be dealt with? Or will that be classified as a complaint? I mean, clearly, you don't want to be chocked up with a continuous bombardment of quite ridiculous comments, and some people just don't appreciate how difficult policing can be. Policing is always carried out by consent, we appreciate, and therefore there will be people who just do not appreciate and do not respect police officers of any style in their duties. But how will the virtual reality bit, should we say, how will those social media elements be captured, or will they be accepted as complaints?
I'll let Paul comment if he wants to add to it, but I know that there's quite a lot of discussion, particularly around that point, about what is going to constitute a complaint, and actually those would not be included in that statistic of complaint. We've got to bear in mind, we're dealing, particularly with a policing point of view, you're dealing with a special situation, aren't you? By the very nature of it, I'm responsible to the public for an organisation called the Force. They actually have the power to detain people of their liberty. Essentially, not indefinitely, but potentially for a period of time. So actually, there quite rightly needs to be extra governance that sits around there and kind of accountability. And one of the things that I wish to bring to this panel is we'll bring a report that covers kind of 3 elements. One will be kind of around the volume, the themes, and then the learning, because that's the whole point of this, really, for me, and why I went for option 2 as opposed to kind of leave it with with PSD. I want the public to have more confidence as a consequence of this, and the opportunity for the organisation to learn. You know, one of my ambitions for Northamptonshire Police is us to be an outstanding force that serves the people of Northamptonshire. We're on a journey to that, and this is just another element of that for me. Is there anything you want to add to that, Paul?
Yeah, only very quickly, 2 quick points. We, as an office, have been quite instrumental in dealing with the Independent Office of Police Conduct to get a lot of clarity around this. They're quite clear. People just making random comments about Northamptonshire Police are rubbish, for example, does not constitute a complaint, and this is not a charter for Northamptonshire, for any force, to have to put enormous resources into monitoring social media to see if people are dissatisfied. If we find something which is quite clearly a complaint, like the police came to my house last night and they did X, Y and Z on social media, we will proactively contact them to explain to them what the right way of making a complaint is. If you refer to page, I think it's page 3 of the report, just under the diagram, there is also some clear guidance from the IPC about who can actually make a complaint. And I won't repeat it because it's in the paper, but I think that gives you a bit more clarity, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Winston, you next.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 52, 2.4, right at the bottom of that paragraph, it talks about a complaint does not have to be in writing, nor must it explicitly state that it is a complaint to be considered as one. I don't quite follow that, because stating that the complaint don't have to be in writing, how would the complainant be able to perhaps complain about that complaint not being dealt with if you don't have some sort of a record of that complaint?
Okay. That's a great answer, but I think Paul's got a better definition.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, well, the complaint doesn't have to be in writing. That's what the legislation says. I can't provide you with a better explanation than that. The government passed the legislation that says when you make a complaint, it does not have to be in writing. If I can explain to you what we already do in relation to that. So if someone rings us and makes a complaint, what we do is we speak to them on the telephone, and then we send them, and this happens in 95% of the time, we send them an email to say thank you for your time this afternoon. From our understanding of the telephone conversation we've just had, these are the key issues that you are complaining about, and they respond to us. If I'm honest, that's a rarity. Most people do complain in writing in any case. What we try and do with that, though, is you take into account there are some people that wish to make a complaint about the police who find it difficult to articulate their views in the written word. There are some people that actually can't read and write properly that want to make a complaint. So it would be farcical to say, if you are disadvantaged that way, you have to put it in writing. What we try and do is help that through. If they can't read and write, and we want to follow that process, we will ask them if they've got somebody that can read and write, an appropriate adult that can do it, or we'll ask them to go to somewhere like the Citizens Advice Bureau and use the Citizens Advice Bureau almost as like an intermediary. And we do that now. So for us, this won't make any difference.
Thanks, Chair. Finished, actually. On page 54, 6.2, talk about low-level complaints. Who decides what's a low-level complaint, and how is that defined? I don't quite follow, you know. Who determines what is a low-level complaint?
It is a complaint that's defined in the regulations as something that, even if proven, would not result in criminal or misconduct charges. So it might be, I'm trying to give you an example because that still doesn't answer your questions. It might be, I make a complaint about the police that the police turned up at my house at 3 o'clock this morning to arrest my son for an offence and walked mud through my house, failed to wipe their feet properly and walked mud through my house. I'm giving you a genuine example, so it puts it into context. There might be some learning from that for the police. There might be some words of advice to be given to a police officer, but that's never going to result in a criminal misconduct hearing as a result of that.
Richard, I think you're next, then Judy. And then I need to...
You go first. Cool.
Carry on.
No.
Oh, you're in serious. Okay. Just a point of clarification, please. On page 54, 6.3, you state that the customer service team will focus on quickly and effectively resolving complaints. I just wondered if you had a sort of series of timescale targets for complaints, how long you do plan to resolve them within and get back to the customer, and how long before a case is closed, if you like, based on a complaint.
Yeah, we do. There are no guidelines within the regulations. We've made the decision that we will make contact with a complainant either the same working day, if they ring during office hours, or if they make contact with us and leave a message or a voicemail or an email, they will be contacted within 2 working days from their initial complaint being received.
And when will that complaint be resolved, if you've got a timescale for that?
No, we've not set a timescale for that, to be frank. And the reason for that is that a complaint can vary from one that we had on Friday, where within 90 minutes of receiving the complaint, we were able to provide an apology and an explanation as to what had happened from the police, to one which could be of serious misconduct, which might take 6 months for the force to investigate. What we will do, though, is make sure that every stage of the proceedings, the person that's making the complaint is clear on what activity is taking place and a timescale for our next contact with them.
There is a statutory piece in there around in the worst case that you've got a long one, that there is at least communication. I think it's every 28 days is the actual piece.
By regulations require every 28 days. We will communicate more regularly than that. I think the key point there is at the end of every telephone conversation, you as a complainant will know what's happening, and you will know at what point we will be back in contact with you.
Option is open.
It's just really an observation on because you're now going to have the independent office for police conduct. You've got the professional standards. You've now got your office. They talk about making complaints through the MP and community or voluntary groups. Is anyone coordinating this? Because I can see this being the public thinking, well, who do I complain to? Or is everybody being briefed to ensure that they triage and then it goes through to the relevant, presumably that's what's being done, and also presumably all the MPs and community groups need to be briefed about this, because there'll be 3 possible ways to, or 3 possible organisations to investigate your complaint.
Okay. The fact that they can complain through a third party or an MP isn't actually a change in legislation. That can take place now. In relation to your key points about communications, though, yes, there is. Deborah's sitting behind you. We've spoken to Deborah. There will be a series of communications going out to key stakeholders, including MPs, voluntary organisations, councillors, etc. The reason that hasn't been done, although these regulations are still due to go live on the 1st of February, as of this morning, I'm still waiting for we are still waiting for a minister to sign them and them to go before Parliament on Friday this week. There's no reason to think that won't happen, but what I'm not going to do is put out a series of communications to people until I'm absolutely nailed down that they're going to go live on the 1st of February. So yes, there will be some communications. IOPC will still deal with high-end stuff. Professional standards will still deal with actual investigations. I think the key thing here is there won't be confusion for the public, because if, for example, a member of the public goes onto our website on the 2nd of February to make a complaint, that will be routed to us. So they won't have to make a decision about where they make a report to. It will be routed to us. Then it's incumbent on us to make sure that member of the public's complaint gets dealt with in the right way and they're updated in the appropriate manner.
And how do you cross-reference that with possibly a complaint they've already put in at another level? Presumably the 3 strands will share database or communicate with each other? Or...
We will be using the same database as professional standards do to record and track our activity.
So a lot of work's gone on to make sure that I can't remember the name of the software, Centurion, has been also updated to enable this, to have kind of multiple in terms of access. As Paul also said, this is something that's been coming for quite some time. So thankfully we're quite well prepared. But I know some other OPCC officers have been in contact with us, say, can we learn from you in terms of our preparation? Let's not kid one out. Come with some risk and some nervousness. We've got people and ready to go, and should it not get implemented, what that might mean in terms of repurposing some individuals. But thankfully that's worked out okay. But by sharing the same system, if you like, then we're also not double keying, people who are doing that. From a public's point of view, you know, there's a place to complain. You now know it's going through us. It has that degree of independence and openness. It is also worth it, and I'm merely just highlighting this point, and I encourage you to deal with it, because we dealt with the complaint bit, but particularly the appeals, and then upon upholding an appeal, so if someone has a complaint and they are unhappy with it and I uphold it, I can't actually tell the Chief Constable what to do. I can make a series of recommendations that they might do. And that might be right. It might be our determination in upholding it is wrong. It might be over a period of time, if you've got a Chief Constable that ignores all of those, it has employment significance, if you like, for them in kind of longer term if they were ignoring the will of the public.
Wow.
Anita.
Paul, on the models, Model 2, obviously, that you have selected, I'm just following the chart, and I was picking up on the Model 3, one item only, keep complaint updated on progress. Why haven't you inserted that step into your Model 2? For instance, you have contact complainant. Couldn't you, into that box, update on the progress? Why is this loop, which is to me very, very important, because I'm the complainer. I want to have some feedback of the progress that you're making on my behalf. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not. It sounds like I'm fudging it. I'm not. That's not my diagram. That's the Home Office diagram. So, yeah, it is a bad diagram until you understand it. So, Model 3 is in relation to keeping complainants updated every 28 days and writing the final letter to them for an investigation that is a long-term investigation being managed by the Forces Professional Standards Department. Okay. The reason that we recommended to Stephen not to go down that route is. I'll take this one on the chin, but my view on that was, in order for me to do that, I have got to ask the force every 28 days what the state of your complaint is. I then need to telephone you and explain it. Invariably, you are likely to ask some questions about that I won't know the answers to, and then I've got to go back to the force. So, in my view, I think that adds an unnecessary layer of bureaucracy and complication to it. What we will be doing, though, just to reassure you, is we will know, because we're going to use the same system, we will know whether or not the force has given you an update every 28 days, and if they haven't, because we're sharing the system, so I'll be able to know, I'll know it. If not, we'll be able to hold the force to account and make sure that they do. So I just think I think we will be acting as the middleman, and we wouldn't know all the answers, and I don't think that is about providing a good service to the public to ring up and then not know the answers to the questions they're going to ask you.
But I think the contention of your question, though, is will on those other, if I use the term low level, keeping if you like, the complainant informed, absolutely. It specifically relates to one with professional standards and their communication with the person. That's the difference between option 2 and 3.
And we shouldn't be taking anywhere near 28 days to resolve something which is a low-level service recovery. That's the reason it's not in that box. If it's going to take more than 28 days, it's really not service recoverable. It should be being investigated.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, we'll see as time goes on what the implications are, and in particular whether it throws up lots of complaints about the PCC. So,
that's why I'm making the point that I can't make the Chief Constable do something. It is a recommendation. If I've recommended and he chooses not to do it, you may have complaints on that basis, which I look forward to you dealing with appropriately.
Miss Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, we all agree openness is important, but as well as this, we've got FOIs, which put a huge pressure on the police and on local authorities as well, and the same people that turn into serial complainants and serial freedom of information requesters are the same people that saying there's not enough police on the beat, I gave a commitment to my family that this Christmas I wouldn't look at social media, and I got through most of it, but then something was highlighted to me. But there are people out there that that do this as almost a hobby, and actually to disrupt. And they do it with MPs as well, I know that, because MPs do hold lists of people that do this. So I think we should, again, go with this and keep a very close eye on where it goes. And it's a classic example of not always following the template that's given to you. You know, we can sometimes do better by doing it differently.
And I think I just want to reiterate that, you know, look, this legislation the government's bringing forth. I endorse it. I think it's a real opportunity for us. Like I say, as long as we see it in the context of the 3 C's, in terms of the complement, comment, and also complaint. You know, in some respects, this isn't funny, but it kind of is. When we went live with our new IT system earlier in the year, actually the force said, well, we can't put the compliments bit on because we've got no one to deal with them. So actually we're going to not let anyone say anything nice about the force. And Emily and her team kind of took that one on, because in all of those, even in the comments, some people don't want to complain, but they want to share something with you. And actually that's one of the things that we need to get right, is that virtuous circle, that you don't wait until everything's gone horribly wrong to try and turn it around. You want to create that environment and culture of continuous improvement, and I think this can only be a good step on that journey. But I take also Martin's point that there are, and that thankfully there are a very small percentage of the people who genuinely have complaints. But actually, if you talk to the volume of work that Paul's team do, you know, a good chunk of it is taken up by a very small number of individuals who quite often have some situations that is quite historic in its nature. And I'm not saying that they were right or wrong in that, but actually they're so far in terms of the annals of time. You know, we all kind of need to move on, because those, quite often we've got officers that have retired years ago that people are still kind of complaining about. And you're right, and that's actually stopping and detracting from time of keeping the people of Northamptonshire safe. But hopefully with this new thing we can avoid those happening, because it can all get dealt with that bit sooner.
Robert, do you want to come in quickly before we move on?
I was wondering if we could have a quick run through the flow chart just to make sure I understand it properly, and I feel much better asking that question after the comment that was made that you guys haven't come up with it. So expressing the dissatisfactions made, it's recorded on Centurion. It can be recorded by what your office or by the police, is that right? On that same system?
Yes.
And then who makes the initial contact with the complainant then? Post-complaint?
Our office.
Okay. And then what's the difference between the handle locally and the customer service resolution?
A customer service resolution is the type of example I gave earlier, where it's obvious, for example, that there's an instant explanation or a fairly quick explanation and an apology, what can we do for you type thing, etc. The second one is something that needs further investigation. Mm-hmm. So if it requires investigation, it will go into the white. I bet you've got a black and white copy, haven't you?
Got a black and white, but the white is clear.
The middle bit, yes. the white bit of the bit. Of the middle. So in essence, if it requires a formal investigation, that's still done by the Professional Standards Department of the force.
Gotcha. And then all of this white bit, including the Model 3 optional bit, is all done by the police, is that correct, with the exception of the IO?
Yeah, in the model that Stephen's adopting, the top box and the bottom box effectively is done by us.
Yes.
The 2 middle boxes, if that makes sense,
yes,
will be done by the force.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you. And just a small point on 4.1, when it talks about complaints can be made by the public who claims various things, it's all still in conduct language, but then the definition of a complaint is changed from conduct to dissatisfaction. Does that need to change?
It might need to change, but that's what the regulations that have been laid before Parliament say. In essence, a current complaint can only be about the conduct of an individual. It's a misuse of the word conduct, but in the current word, a complaint is about any expression of dissatisfaction. Unfortunately, those 3 bullet points are a straight lift from the legislation. So I can't. You're right. It's not clear, but that's what we've got to work with.
Sure.
And I would also say that there's a reason for us. We're bringing it to you in terms of timing. I know Sarah from the press is probably going to pick some of this up. We would hope to provide greater clarity to the public to enable this to be kind of clearer from them. But given that, you know, you're the first day after Christmas and some of this has, like I said, come in last week, what can I tell you?
Just my sorry, Chair, my final point on that is, in terms of what we do, actually the legislation makes it a lot easier for us, because at the minute we have this moral dilemma where someone rings up and makes a complaint and we have to decide whether it's about the conduct of an individual, which can often be a contentious point for us. The reality is, in the new world, if someone says they're not happy, we record it as a complaint and then we deal with it in the most appropriate way. Because if I'm honest, if I took my policing head off, as a member of the public, when I want to make a complaint, it means I'm not happy about something. And probably the same with all of us. So from a policing point of view, it actually makes that easier. The decision-making process for us is really easy. If you call us and say you're not happy, we record it as a complaint, then we discuss with you what the best way of dealing with it is. As opposed to at the minute you say you want to make a complaint and I have to try and explain to you, you can't make a complaint because you're not happy, because it doesn't actually relate to the conduct of an individual, which is really difficult to explain. And if I'm honest, if I hadn't got a background in policing, it feels to the customer a bit like we're trying to cuff it and fudge it right from the get-go, if I'm honest.
Okay, so if we could just note the report and please keep us informed should it cause problems in the future. We'll now move on to the budget update, and I just wondered whether, because we've got sort of 3 items on budget in effect, we've got police, then fire, and then the early views about the precepts, whether you might think, is it worth you sort of bringing your thoughts about the precept in with the current budget, or do you want to deal with them separately?
If I may, Madam Chairman, I'd like to, if it's your agenda, I would like to keep them separately, and I say that because actually there are, you know, the focus on, if you like, each service is different and the challenge they face are different, and I'd prefer to keep it that way. Particularly as I also have to keep the money separate, so let's keep it mentally separate.
Yep. So if we can go on to policing budget update.
Okay. Madam Chairman, today's report sets out at high level the forecast outturn for the period of 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of October, together with a financial update. As you will see, we are forecasting a balanced budget. However, the Force is forecasting an overspend of £200,000. Thankfully, this is a reduction from the £700,000 that they forecast in August. And that is quite normal. They do start the year with this very serious concern that they're going to overspend. And Helen gets the thumb screws out and, I mean, works with them carefully to make sure she bring it. My office is forecasting an underspend of £600,000, which actually is an increase from. I don't want everyone kind of jumping up. Some of that is a timing thing, where actually we've got some recruitments. I blame Nikki. No, she's got some people in terms of bringing the youth service on, and the time to recruit the right individuals, get them through vetting and kind of get on stream. It's not really an unspent. Essentially, it's a slippage. They're there for a 3-year project, and it's just slid into another 5 financial year. But of course, that gives us the positive effect that we end up with a total balanced budget from the Force's overspend. So we continue to monitor spending and ensure that strict budgetary controls are maintained, and the report in front of you provides a great deal of detail that I'm more than happy to answer with the able support of Helen, so she can answer them even better.
Okay, Anita, you got your hand up first.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
Helen, did you want to say something first? Or you no? Okay.
Okay. Right, I'll go straight away into the paragraph 2.4. Now, you say that you're going to have 191 extra police officer, but for the year 2019, 20, 2021, you only have funding for 57. So you still have a shortfall then of funding of 134. Isn't it 191 minus 57, so that 134?
I think we're both going to answer this one, because I'm going to talk to you about the politics of it, and Helen will talk to you about the money of it. The government has made a commitment of 20,000 police officers. Our share of it on the current funding formula, which, as I think you know my feelings on that one, and to give you some idea, if there was a better one, it would be more like 220. But that currently means of the 20,000 based on the current funding formula, we would get 191. They have not confirmed what the funding, what that profile looks like beyond April, the end of March 20, which actually is where the 57 comes from. So at the moment, we actually only have, and here's the funny thing, I say confirmed funding, and Helen would probably laugh at that point, because we've no such thing as confirmed funding, which will lead nicely into point 11, because actually we do not know how much money we will get per police officer yet. We managed to get a little bit in this financial year to help as part of the 19 that we had recruited, as mentioned there. But we actually, as you can see, we have the best part of it's not quite 130 something that we have not had confirmed. But I also want to show you, we don't actually know how much money we'll get per police officer on the basis of 57. The one thing I can assure you, because through your support and some of the decisions we took previously, we will be able to have our 57 recruited on, and if you like, in Northamptonshire Police on the 1st of April, despite not knowing how much money that we will have with it, and we are taking that on risk from a reserve perspective because of the prudency that we've been able to do, but let's not underestimate the risk. And I shall pass over to Helen, who'll talk about known unknowns and stuff like that.
Thank you, I'll stretch. So, yes, Anita, we've had confirmation this year for the 19, and if you look on the table in 2.6, you'll see a little line that says funding available from National Uplift. Yeah. We've actually got funding for the 19, so that is known, that's great, that's in the budget, which is really good. The 57 includes that 19, okay? So it is about the messages, but we don't know, as Stephen said, how much is coming in the 2021 budget. It's a great uncertainty at this moment. We don't know about, sorry, it's been banging this drum for a few weeks. We don't know about... We don't know about the precept levels, and we don't know about the grant funding levels. But what we have done when we come to the February meeting is we have built the base budget for next year, including that 57 and including Stephen's commitment on the precept levels, because it is that important.
And we hope and pray to have some numbers. There is no guarantee that we will have all of those in place. So it could be a very interesting meeting. I think there actually are some legislative points around what they should or shouldn't do, but I might be forced to make decisions around precept within the legal restraints that I'm given without the full understanding of what thing. I don't actually think that will be the case, but it particularly is a real risk. There has been some very positive language about saying, well, actually from a recruitment point of view, we'll give you this to pay for salaries, but there'll also be some additionality for equipment and training. But in other instances, we've been given numbers which indicate that we would be potentially £6,000 per police officer short in terms of our funding. So just give you some of the challenges that Helen's got, and my reason for going over to soothe Port Helen is trying to kind of project what are, and this is absurd when you actually think about it. We're trying to make long-term strategic decisions, and we don't know what a funding envelope is going to look like on the 1st of April right now. We have an indication, but it's only that.
Carry on to that. You have stated that these numbers is to replace as well those retired by 2021. Now, I don't have the numbers of those officers retiring. Let's say that you have a shortfall of officers by 2021. Is that in your policy perhaps to entice your existing police officer who may desire to retire by 2021 to stay longer for the numbers, the shortfall?
A great deal of work has been done on this basis. The key commitment I can tell you, there will not be a case that we will not be at 1367 by the 31st of March 2021. I'm getting used to these 2020s. One of the things I agreed with the force is I have a quarterly target for each tier that they need to hit, and only at that point will I then release the money to the force. So actually, one of the problems I've had not under this chief officer team, but early in leadership, is we would agree an amount of recruitment and police officers. I would find that they've not achieved that recruitment, but they'd still managed to spend the money on something else. So we have gone out of our way to say there are tiers. At those points, when you hit those, you get the money. To be honest, if we don't hit 1367, we will not be able to call off the money from central government or the money that I have currently committed to give the force. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Helen.
Can I just ask what the normal timing is? Because I know it all seems to be for local government that the figures are released on the last day before Christmas. But this seems quite late. Is this unusual?
Yes, it is, and it's very, very, very late. It's usually around the middle of December. I do remember the heady days when once upon a time it was in November. I don't know if anybody else remembers those happy days. Yeah. But it is usually the middle of December, usually the week before the Christmas week. So because of the election, because of Purdah, it held up everything. Local government did have their provisional settlement announced. So we're hoping, fingers crossed, that something for policing will come very shortly. But it is very late, Chair.
And just to give you some idea of the level of detail that everyone has gone into on this, that is not the number of police officers, that is full-time equivalent. So actually, we could have more, but they have to be full-time equivalent. So if I've got two part-timers, I might have 1,450, if you know what I mean. But actually, I have to have 1,367 to both unlock the money that I intend to give the force and the money from central government to make sure we get it. The real positive news in all of this, not forgetting the extra 130. The 1,367, I think, actually puts us at something like the highest that we've been in kind of a generation in Northamptonshire Police, and the 1,500, which I think is, if you add them all together in the end, if we get what we're supposed to, should put us on 1,501 by, is it March 23, I think? 23 will be by far the most we've actually ever had, which is positive news, but also the county continues to grow at quite a significant rate, hence my point about kind of funding formula, because of course you've got, you know, between something like 2001 and now, you've got broadly, you know, 150,000 extra people in there with not resource. So this is putting us back in a more secure, much safer position, but doesn't take... it's important that the funding formula needs to be reflected, because actually, you know, this perception that you've got sleepy shires, and I perhaps took exception to the PCC for West Midlands, kind of going, well, only anything bad ever happens in Birmingham or the big urban areas. Well, actually, because of their capacity to deal with some of those problems have quite rightly spread across this country as defined by county lines and the other problems that kind of come with it. I'll get off that soapbox.
Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. And I agree that the general election got in the way, but since the 12th of December, and it's only 3 weeks, we've also had some settlement figures come out on other aspects of local government organisation, local government new homes bonus. So things are happening very, very quickly, and we've just got to keep the pressure on to get to know where we are. But of course, you don't just pluck police officers off of trees. No. They have to be trained. So I think we should applaud the fact that we're going to have a considerable number of new police officers on the streets in the spring of this year, and I think that's something we should applaud.
And just when you say on the streets, I will remind you, it takes a number of weeks to train them, and before they kind of get independent patrol, and it takes time for, you know, for that experience to kind of grow. And you know, you don't also, you know, there are specific regulations around driving to a 999 on blue lights, training that needs to go on. Those things don't happen overnight. Northamptonshire Police was already behind on some of that, and so actually this new influx continues to make sure this is something we need to kind of push forward. So that's why I kind of reiterated, generally, the foundations in both technology and some of the management changes that have been made are going to make that difference. These new resources are real positive. It still means there is other work that's got to be done, and it doesn't mean there's kind of an instant fix. You know, when I get to March of 31, there is a lot of work to continue to do, a lot of pressure needs to be applied, detailed to make sure it's followed through, so we see the benefit of that to the people of Northamptonshire.
Okay, Winston, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, while you know everybody's praising what we're expecting in terms of number of police officers, it still doesn't bring us back to the numbers we had in 2010. You know.
Sorry, Winston, it does.
It does.
Yes, yes.
That's when
we were just over 1,300 in 2010.
Right.
Without the government supporting us,
right.
By the end of my first term, we would have been back at that. Now, some of that, I'm not trying to go, I'm wonderful. Some of that is a consequence of the growth in the county that's enabled it. Some is as a consequence of the work we've done financially. But the 1,367 by next year genuinely takes us beyond it by, like I say, some way, because I think the number we used is something like 1310, but it moves us significantly beyond it, and I don't think we've ever been in our history. I'm not looking at you as though you are obviously wise, Paul, but not that you've been around there. Oh God, I nearly dug hole there, didn't I? It'll get me later. But, yeah, still got friends in there, yeah.
No, I was making reference to April this year, not next year. The figures that we quoted.
No, you're absolutely right. At the moment, my prediction for this year, and I'll be very specific, the target that I've agreed with, I don't even need to look it up, is 1294. You're absolutely right. In the absolute terms, we won't quite be there, but we will be at 1328 by June. So if you know, it'll depend on where that intake goes or whatever. But broadly, you know, and let's not kid one another for all of my comments about unfair funding. That's something that Northamptonshire has achieved that is very rare, and you're right, on a national scale basis, you're absolutely right. A lot of people would dream of being in the position that I'm sat in front of you saying that we will have achieved where we were in 2010. There are very few forces that will be able to say that. Now, some of that is as a consequence of the additional burden that the taxpayer of Northamptonshire are paying and the growth that the actual county has gone through.
I just made a comment. I didn't really ask the question I wanted to. The question what I want to find out is that on page 59, 2.7.1, 1, 2, 3, the fourth bullet point down, you talk about low pensions uptake. I don't quite follow what is meant by that, because you can have low pension uptake by people retiring but not starting the pension for whatever reason. You can also have low pension uptake by individuals who are entitled to join the scheme but fail to join the scheme. So could you explain that, please?
We budget on a certain number of individuals joining the scheme, and less joiners to the police force have gone into the pension scheme than we had expected. It's been a bit of a continuing theme over the past few years. There used to be a time when virtually everybody would join the pension scheme when they joined the service, but that's why.
And just on that, Councillor Strachan, I now hold a very regular meeting with thankfully because we have a large number of them, the intake before they start and then at the end of their kind of basic training. And some of that is, this might sound odd, is positive. We've had a number of individuals who are more mature, have got a bit more life experience, who are joining. I mean, we an intake recently, a number of military said, well, actually, I don't want to do something in terms of my pension. You've got some others that are also at the bottom end that have said, well, actually, I'm not quite ready until because in policing, the starting salary is really not a good level. One of the things Northamptonshire has done is, and I'll get the numbers wrong, was something like the minimum you start on normally is something like 19,000. Given some of the pressure that we've had here in Northamptonshire, as a consequence of our proximity to London, where the starting salary in the Met is now best part of £30,000. We've needed to raise ours, and as a consequence of that, it's also attracted some people who say, well, I tell you, I don't want to start my pension in this year, but I'm going to do it kind of in the future. So some of it is bad news, but some of it's also good in terms of the profile of some of the individuals that are actually coming and joining the force. And one of the things, if I may, I'm going to take great pleasure in, that I found really positive, there was quite a number that were actually coming to join Northamptonshire Police that were from outside of the county. The furthest was from Cornwall, Devon, Nottingham, so they're actually not just coming all over. Now, I think some of that is us having our act together to give them the opportunity to come and join. But I take your point. We want all of them where possible. But I think the other bit to take into account, and I think is a real challenge for policing in totality, there used to be consensus that people would join and stick around for 30 years. I don't think that's what we're hearing, that's not the norm. Now, I think actually in policing, that's something we really need to consider, and flexibility about how pensions are going to work is going to be really quite important. And that's quite an important structural change for policing, because actually what you don't want is someone after 10 years you've invested all of this money in them, and that knowledge and experience, and they go off in something else. So actually it also gives you some insight when I start to talk about kind of welfare, mental health, and looking after our people, then you kind of understand the longer term implications for some of those things. Sorry, Councillor Strachan, I apologise for keep interrupting you.
Thank you.
Okay, Anita.
I would like to talk on multi-force share service, which is being recategorized as enabling services. Now, I've noticed that the overspend on ICT cost of 355k. Now, I know that you have done a review on that because you told me that last time. How confident are you that you are going to keep a lid on, manner of speaking, on those contracts? Because it can really,
Yes, we have done a lot of work on the ICT contracts, but there's still an area that caused me some uncertainty. Yes, and I would say that in both fire and in policing, it's a very complex area. We've done a lot of horizon scanning as part of next year's budgeting for the capital programme and for the revenue budget. So we hope those uncertainties are getting fewer, but we have to keep working through and keep the pressure on. So it's an area in our budget discussions with both the Chief Constable and the Chief Fire Officer that Stephen has asked for lots more detail on as well. So we are ploughing through them in a lot of detail. So getting better, but I still feel work to be done.
And to give some context for that, you know, our current draft capital programme over the next 5 years, as I think it's something like £30 million worth of ICT investment, you know, significant sums. Now, there's a great deal of scrutiny that is coming down the line for us between them and the force, but also that's why enabling service is quite important, is the right senior leadership in there, that also that we can then look to ensure that we've probably got a little more latitude to bring, you know, if you like, some more resources in on the ICT front, you know, not naming but there are some questions, you know, I use on the fire side, you know, in terms of they've got technology that enables to kind of do the updates. Actually, you know, not necessarily got the individuals trained to be able to use that. So there is a kind of basic level things that need to be done, but also what is our long-term strategic to make sure that we can kind of share. What I didn't want to see, and I'm not criticising them for it, but, you know, I visited Derbyshire, which they have a combined police and fire headquarters, but they have two completely different networks. You can they have two actually receptionists, one for fire, one for police. You're not taking kind of you're sharing a building, but you're not working together. Ours really is about delivering genuine purple. And that might mean, and I am speculating, but from an IT department, instead of having kind of police and fire, it might be someone who's doing networks that does networks for all, so that we actually can start to see some of these applications and the all different ones. So make sure that you've got kind of more resilience for both. But I can foresee we need a chief technology officer or someone senior to kind of come in and make sure that we're making those much more long-term sort of strategic decisions than we are currently.
Stephen, you were mentioning before, and you've said it into your report, the drone. Would the drone, obviously this is something new that you've initiated, both for the fire and for the police. How effective and efficient saving that you have made by not deploying, say for instance, human resource as opposed...
Okay. Oh gosh, how long have you got for this one? Two parts. One part that I didn't finish was, you did mention in terms of MFSS. I've got MFSS on the fire side, and I've got LGSSS. I've got too much SSS, I think. At some point, we want to make sure that we kind of bring those together. Paul's leading a piece of work where strategically we are actually looking about what the right solution is, not for the next 2 or 3 years, but what for the next 10 years to bring those kind of elements together, and we're shaping that and present that appropriately. But actually there'll be something that will, if you like, we will solve the problems that each have had with their shared service. On the drone front, there's two parts. One, we've been both running a pilot, and I say pilot, it's kind of, you actually, to fly a drone, and you can feel free to correct me, Rob, but actually to fly a drone, you actually have to be qualified by the Civil Aviation Authority. And so we've actually invested some additional money in terms of training, and actually there's some really good stories that we can share with you around and really saw some of the benefit of that kind of over Christmas in terms of making communities safe because of additional capability there. But also at the same time, the Force has done a fantastic piece of work about looking where it uses drones and also NPAS, or the National Police Air Service. And the reason I said we could talk for hours, because actually this is a flawed funded model that's kind of run centrally, which if we're not careful has a spiral problem, that an amount of money, what you use the previous year dictates you're paying for the coming year. However, if everybody stops using it, you still end up paying the same amount of money. So actually there isn't kind of no internal market, and their helicopters, the Euro helicopter that they use, of something like the top 10 in the world, something like policing in the UK uses like 8 of them in terms of the oldest airframes. So actually there's a piece around that. So it's not simple that we just reduce ours. There's another piece that there's a national piece of capability that needs to be done there. And there is a piece of work being done in conjunction with Home Office and Government about what that might be. So at the moment, we're on target, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, we're on to save ourselves something like £250,000 this year, just over in terms of our usage of helicopter, with no loss of capability, and also with additional by overlaying our kind of drone piece. But ironically, we might not get the benefit, because if West Midlands and the Met and others drop their usage, then they're not kind of picking up that kind of, there's a number of air hours, if not being used, that's still a cost that it takes to maintain or bring them. There's a long answer to your question, but hopefully you get the gist.
I think we might come back to that another time. That sounds like a long one. Right, so can we note this report? Oh, sorry, Andre.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a point there, really, to compliment you on your strive to link up IT, which I think is so important, as we know. And obviously the mobile data advantages of having both fire and police with those information at their fingertips enables so much more of a greater, safer community. You might want to look into, when you're looking further into the IT scenarios, into a 24-hour coverage support system for police IT, because I know that there isn't one at the moment, but I know that that's something that has been requested to have an out-of-hours call-out effectively, because they have obviously the needs, as we know, from a 24/7 operation. And fire do provide that, so therefore there is a linkage there that I'm sure could be made.
I'm not sure where you're getting your information. My understanding, and I'm just looking at you two to confirm, we do have that 24-hour coverage. It may be you found someone who doesn't know that, and there's perhaps some work we should do to educate someone, but just to give you some comfort in that. But if you gave me the opportunity, I could spend all afternoon talking about the Emergency Services Network, which is a multi-billion pound programme that the government to actually bring. We all use a thing called Airwave, which is actually kind of old radio waves, and they're going to be bringing essentially the 5G, 4G down the line. I sit on the national board. It's not as a consequence of me being there. It's now in a much better place than it has been, but it still has some way to go in terms of delivery and scrutiny to make sure it kind of delivers from a monetary point of view. But I will shut up because you've got lots more to ask.
It's Airwave keeps coming up at the National Association as well, and I wasn't aware of it. Right, can we note this report, please? Are we happy to note the report? Okay. And then, I don't know, Rob's sitting there primed.
Thankfully, he doesn't have to...
we're going on to fire.
Oh, Rob, we've got some questions, but no, I'm just kidding. Madam Chairman, as the report sets out, there is a forecast underspend of 428k on the NCFRA budget. I do want care that everyone kind of goes underspend. Just to hold that thought, some of that is as a consequence of removing some money around into new areas, but there are some things. But some of it is also some money that is actually additional money that we've managed to procure. At this stage, so in pure terms, there is a forecast underspend of £428,000 from the NCFRA budget compared to 370 in August. This is underspend is after an additional 100,000 has been transferred to reserves to mitigate the impact of the 2021 recruitment of the additional firefighters from next month. This underspend has mainly arisen from additional local business rates, Section 31 grants, which also lower than anticipated in August, is above the included in the budget and governance transfer, together with underspends on whole-time firefight and train, offset by additional property costs. The report underlines how we're building a brighter future for the service, and we're happy to take any questions. But I do just want to kind of add, before we kind of rush, I have, and some work's being done later on in the month, I have an estimated, and I mentioned it earlier, budgetary requirement from a capital programme of £22 million. So that just gives you the sort of state of some of the appliances, equipment that needs to be done. Now, obviously, there's more work. By the way, that excludes estates, so I don't want anyone to think that's including buildings, because that can really ramp it up. That is a mixture of £15 million worth of vehicles, and some £7 million worth of equipment. A great deal of work's still got to be done on that, but actually there's quite a significant... Keeps you awake at night, doesn't it, Helen? And so, some of that is also, you know, we've got a service that's done fantastic in its first 12 months, but actually, you know, it's used to being part of a kind of a department in a larger organisation rather than an actual service. But it's really important that we bring together in terms of some of those enabling to make sure that kind of the resilience of that journey is going to be important. But actually, you know, the finances are still perilous. There is still major risk in terms of, you know, thankfully we haven't had it yet, an appliance breaking down on the way to something. But that is a very real risk that we're working hard to make sure we mitigate. Happy to take some questions, unless, Helen, you want to add anything?
Thank you. If I could just add a couple of points. As Stephen said, yes, it does look good. It does look great having an underspend at this point. But as he's highlighted, some of that is better than expected income coming in, but also there are some timing things with that. So there are costs that we would have expected to spend on training the new recruits, but because they're not coming until the end of February, most of those costs will now fall into next year. So there is a bit of a timing thing on the recruits and on the costs of the training. And there's also been, at the beginning of the year, the Chief Fire Officer has been doing a review on quite a lot of operational equipment areas. So in the next month's monitoring, we will see that we've started to be able to invest in some hose reels and some ladders, for example. So that underspend was a bit of a timing issue as well, and it will reduce.
I've got Winston first and then Anita.
Thanks. Question on you have here securing water supply. Is that just for the buildings?
Winston, could you give us a number, because everyone keeps calling out the page number. We don't have the page number. You've got a different
64.
No, the bit I need is the 2.6 or the 1.3.
2.5.
Okay, thank you.
On the budget, you've got securing water supply. I think it's 64,000. I just wanted to know, is that just for running the services, or is it to do with when you go out to attend a fire?
It's the repairing and maintaining and installing of water hydrants, so the essentially equipment that we need around the county. And when I said about some of the timing,
yes.
We have got quite a backlog of those,
yes.
And so we will be seeing some of the expenditure happening quite a lot over the next few months,
so,
repairing those hydrants.
Right, so you're saying that the service is responsible for maintaining the hydrants?
The water hydrants, yes.
I didn't know that. So that's good. That's news to me, anyway.
Let me clarify that. I think there's definitely some maintaining and some repairing.
There is. We're certainly responsible for maintenance, repairing, and also for some new installations and over a certain number of new developments. So yes, it is a cost we've had to burden.
But if you'd like us to get the proper clarification on the definition, of course we can.
It's just news to me. I didn't realise. Really, what I wanted to ask is about, I'm looking at the budget. I haven't seen anything here about income generation, or income generating or generation, because I'm under the understanding that, you know, we carry out training for other services at our place in East Northants. So what's happening about that? I mean, you have a place in East Northants which is really costing money, and good facilities there. So I am disappointed that there's nothing about income generation from that, and also from the Cobra service, which my understanding also was that we are like an agent for Cobra, and we train other services to use the Cobra, and we probably get an income from the training, plus as an agent we probably get a percentage of from any purchases. So could I have somebody commenting on that, please? Because I'm very disappointed there.
It's the figures that you see here, for example, the training line, that is net of any income, so it's after the income has been taken into account. If it would help the panel, Chair, I'm happy to provide a little bit of a clarification by email.
Could you please?
Of course I can. So yes, there is some income that the fire do generate, but I will highlight that the income is less at the moment than that budgeted, and it is an area that we do need some further work and some further exploration on that we have highlighted. But I will provide that clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
And just on that, we have tasked, given some of the challenges we talked about, pump availability, quite rightly, I've said to the service and the team that the key is to make the public safe, so actually get driving up pump availability. We've also discussed whether we need some additional resource to actually see what we can do in terms of our income generation and kind of commercialisation, and we're currently looking at a post to see how we do it, because it must not compromise keeping the pumps on the line and in terms of availability. In other words, it's a nice to have, I think, and I'll probably let Rob comment. I also think that that Cobra isn't as leading edge as it used to be, and so actually there are, whilst we do get some training credits, I don't think it's as significant, if you like, as it may well have been kind of in the past. I don't know if Rob wants a comment on that, but.
Hello. Thank you, Commissioner. The thing is, a lot of services are now taking on Cobra or Cobra of sorts. We used to work with a company called Coldcut. That's come to an end, but we do our own training as such, and we've got one member of our staff who was funded through that, and it provided training to a number of other services. In fact, was very innovative at the time, and still is a great tool for every fire and rescue service to use because of what it does do. As we're probably all aware here, there's no need to go into the building when you can attack it from outside, and it's a tool that attacks from the outside, so you don't have to commit firefighters into it. But the Commissioner's right. We are very keen on a commercial direction. We haven't got our own trading company, which does prevent us making a lot of income. But we're making income. We know we need to throw resource at it, and that's one of the stumbling blocks we've got at this point in time. So what we're trying to do with a very lean service is train our own staff, make them competent, plus also on the periphery trying to sort of train some others as well. Like the Commissioner said, we're looking at a commercial manager just to have a look to see what opportunities are available. But just for awareness, I went to a trading workshop not so long ago, and a lot of services who've taken up commercial activity. And when you look at the money they invest into the commercial activity itself, there's not a lot sort of made at the end. Certainly for some of the really large companies as well, Red One, there are a lot of risks that run that, and that's what we're working through at the minute. But certainly income generation is on our agenda.
But you also made an interesting point about the Chelveston and the training facility over there. There's also discussions with landlords to kind of say, well, actually, is that usable from a policing point of view? So actually, is a better use of our assets to make sure that we do that. And I don't want anyone to take I got it down on Cobra, because I can only commend the service for the building they saved at Plum Park at Toaster. You might have seen it just on kind of Christmas Eve. Without Cobra, that building would have burnt down, and that historic building would have been lost to the people of Northamptonshire had Cobra not been able to kind of go in there. So it has an important role to play. But as you say, it's rolled out across more services now, so it's not quite as leading edge as it was, and the opportunity is not quite as much there.
Just coming back to what Councillor Lackham was saying, the commercial 2.63, page 65. Now, the income that you were supposed to generate on a 5 months was 71. You've only achieved 33, so under your income of 38,000. How confident are you basing on the explanation we've just had that this is going to be met before the year end?
I think it will be a challenge. And the Chief, I think it will be a challenge to achieve, which is why we've reduced the forecast in the monitoring. We've also, in our draft budget for next year, reduced the assumption for the beginning of the year because we need to take a prudent approach. Yes, we want to build it, but we need to have a prudent approach to start with. I think it will still be a challenge to achieve, but I know Rob and the Chief Fire Officer and the team will maximise it wherever they do have the opportunity to do so. But we have reduced the forecast and we review it every month to see if it needs amending.
And it is worth bearing in mind that even at the beginning of the year, it's 0.0 something of a percent, which is why, in many respects, I'd rather we get someone in to look at it, and it's not a distraction for the rest of the kind of organisation. Because at the end of the day, the number one priority is making sure that we keep the people of Northamptonshire safe. Rather than kind of a distraction like that. I think it's a nice to have, not a must have, but please don't underestimate my commitment to say that we'll do it, but I'd rather we do it right. But the number one thing is pump availability and those timings, if you like.
Just a quick one on investment income, actually, which is very good. You've had 20,000. How did that come about? Thank you.
Don't give away the dark secrets.
Okay. We have a contract, well, Fire have a contract with Local Government Shared Services to provide treasury management services because they are a brand new organisation. Obviously, when they were part of the County Council did their overall treasury management. So we have had them looking at the balances, popping some in some interest-bearing accounts, getting an idea of what we can get the money to work for us. It's not a huge amount, but it's a little bit and it's welcome. It's not in any risky areas because we haven't got a long enough picture of our cash flow to know all of our ups and downs in fire. So every time we've had a little bit extra, it's gone in the interest-bearing account and they've managed to achieve 20. It might even make a fractionally more than that when we get to the year end, but 20 is our prudent estimate at the moment.
It will counteract the efficiency of the other side.
A bit helps, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, every little helps. Susan. Yes, so no, not at all. So can we note the report, please? Are we happy to do that? Okay. So now we move on to the early views about your proposed precept.
I think myself and Helen will perhaps talk to that. I think the first, we've kind of alluded to it right now. We're in quite a challenging kind of situation. It's more certain for fire right now because it looks like that we're kind of limited on the kind of 1.99, and there is, I think, more certainty over what that funding envelope kind of looks like over the next 2 years. We have written to both the Prime Minister and the Policing Minister to see if there's any kind of latitude to see what we can do to. It sounds like I'm always bleating for more money. I do want to reassure you all, as you can see from some of the work that's being done, we're also making sure that we sweat the assets that we've got well. So from a fire point of view, I think we kind of have some picture. We actually have our base budget from a policing point of view, we have some confidence in. It's this piece around the uplift and what money might or might not come with it. And then there's this bit about, you know, the then, well, actually, no, I think the Chancellor, I couldn't think of his name then, Chancellor gave some indication around the 750 million. What can or cannot be in and out of that? If some forces go under, will that make more or less in terms of others? Which is why I was making sure that we're keen that, from our point of view, that R57 can start on the 1st of April and we can claim the maximum that we can. I mean, there actually is even some upside that if God forbid some others underspend, then there actually is some opportunity for us, because of our other recruitment, to, if you like, put some of our recruitment into the following year, which is why I'm so adamant about the 1367. We are obviously out consulting at this moment in time in terms of the public, and that's still in its kind of early stages. So hopefully over the next couple of weeks, the indications we get from central government will be clearer. Obviously, we've got some bits, there's some slight nuances around council tax, some of the bits that were or weren't taken in previous years that I'll let kind of Helen talk from a tax-based perspective. But in fairness, it's quite an uncertain picture for me to kind of formulate my musings on at this moment in time. And you've got, you know, I've got different commissioners taking different views of some I've got in a £9.99 lift, some I've got, you know, even higher than that in terms of some of their base budgets and assumptions. We've taken a very conservative approach to our kind of financial planning, and one would hope that we, in the way that we were from our initial thoughts from fire, that we get some upside that perhaps we're not anticipating. I'd rather be in that than kind of go, we've kind of got to cut further. Helen, is there anything you want to add to that?
If I could just say a huge thank you to everybody from the boroughs and districts. Your Section 151s are always really good about getting me your forecasts for your tax bases and for the surplus and the deficits. It makes a huge difference to work on near final figures. So thank you very much to all of them for that. We've had increases in tax base quite high over the years. It's just come in just on our estimate this year, so I'm pleased it's on the estimate, but that is because obviously quite a lot was released last year. I know there was a lot of work done last year, so you will see that impact slightly more in policing, that there is less surplus to go round, as all of our colleagues around the county are likely feeling as well. But they were the points I was just going to highlight. On fire, we've got slightly more certainty. We've got the provisional settlement out. The deadline for that is the 17th of January for consultation to be in. Stephen has to propose his precept by the end of January, and I think the responses will be out in February. So I think we're very tight for timescales in terms of what he can propose on fire. So we have worked on the 1.99 scenario, and should something really nice happen, the £5 scenario as well. But on policing, we have a wide range of scenarios. We've been working on about 5. Okay.
Happy to take any questions.
If we can do anything to assist, giving a little reminder to anybody that you really need that settlement as soon as possible, then I'm sure we'll take that opportunity. Are there any questions to Stephen? Martin?
Just a general comment, if I may, Madam Chairman, is, you know, you mentioned about the 151 officers. I think the staff in the districts and boroughs are also extremely good at collecting this money, and I think that is worth mentioning as well. Certainly in Northamptonshire, a lot better than in other areas of the country, and I think that should be mentioned also.
And I think, yeah, thank you, because that's the right about the bit in terms of the surplus. So there's this kind of assumptions made, and in each year we've kind of everyone's tended to kind of overachieve. So yeah, I too, with Helen, would like to thank them for the work and the good record that we've actually got.
Right. If there are no more questions, then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the police and fire guidance, which is quite a thick document. I did help them put it together initially and sort of corrected various things and update it. But I think we could probably spend about an hour just discussing it, to be honest. And I don't really think that 4:05 we want to do that. I don't know what you think, but I haven't discussed this with James. I just wonder whether we ought to have some sort of small working party to look at it, because there's a lot in it, and there's various things like, you know, possibility of maybe having our own website, or different thing that we might need to discuss with Unitary coming on, of where we can, how this panel is constituted after Unitary. I mean, it's not going to stay the same, is it? So, I mean, we're perhaps a little early for that particular aspect, but I think, personally, it just seems like there's quite a lot to go through here, and I don't think we can do it justice in a few minutes. James, are we okay to just set up some sort of working group?
In principle, yes, Chair, and I think it's an approach that the panel has certainly used in the past in terms of looking at how it should seek to operate after the change of fire governance came into effect. I mean, I think, and I may be highlighting something that you've already asked here, I think it would be useful to have an idea that setting up a working group would be justified, in the sense that if you convene a meeting and the working group sits down and says, well, this guidance all seems fairly straightforward, I think we're doing almost all of it anyway, then, okay, very quick working group meeting. I mean, the reason I say you may have answered that already is because you've said quite specifically you think there's something that the panel needs to get its teeth into here. So I guess it would be useful to know when we're setting up a working group that setting up a working group is justified, I think, is what I'm saying.
Stephen?
Just one plea really for me, because at this moment in time you actually haven't got that long, so you've gotten it in the same way 122 days. There's elections to the new unitary authority. Currently the county council is the custodian and secretariat for this. How is that actually going to be administered? Is one of them going to be done, or is it by joint? So I just asked that question, and there may already be an answer, but I think it's important that within short order you'd be like, well, actually there'll be no one organising it, and where are they going to be, and all those sorts of things.
Well, maybe not a complete answer, we'll see. Yeah, it's certainly an absolutely valid point to make that the change of local government in Northamptonshire will change the constitution of the panel. At the moment, its membership, leaving aside the independent co-opted members who are in a different position, is formed between the 8 existing authorities. In the future, its membership, the councillor membership, will be formed between the 2 authorities. That change needs to be planned for and an appropriate way forward agreed. I think the lead-in time for that is slightly longer, in the sense that there will be the shadow authorities for a year before the new unitaries come into formal existence. So my understanding is that for the year of shadow authorities, the panel will effectively carry on its current basis. But yeah, even leaving aside any issues connected with considering this guidance, there would certainly be a job of work to be done about looking at what the implications of local government reorganisation are for the panel, and that would be that would be different aspects. So how will its councillor membership be constituted in future, and who will support it after the county council ceases to carry out that function, will be just 2 of the aspects that will need to be considered.
I just don't want you all fighting over us. It's like...
So I think that there's several aspects really. There's the guidance and various things to do with panels in general, which will if we're going to carry on for at least another sort of year and a half, be worth looking into. There's also this aspect of unitary, which perhaps we might discuss at a working party and say, whether we need to talk to the shadow authority once it's set up, etc. I think there's probably several different aspects there. Richard?
Yeah, I think starting things like websites up would be futile, bearing in mind we're just going to be dissolved in 18 months. I would suggest, I don't know how you feel, that we set up a working group to look at the current constitution and then come up with something to present to the shadow bodies as they are instituted as from May. So we get to get whatever the document is that actually gives us our constitution as a panel, that we look at that in a group, we come up with how we see it split, and then we present that to the shadow authorities during the year that they are in shadow, for them to ratify to come into force with the new unitaries. I think that would be a sensible way forward, and at the same time we can encompass maybe some of this, whereby we can develop what the new panel will look like. It will obviously be badged, maybe badged slightly differently, etc. So a working group would be great, and we've done it with the joint committees. The joint committees came together and put together a constitution for the various West and the North authorities. So I don't know why we just don't do something similar and then present it to the shadows to see how they feel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think there may be an officer group that are looking at this through the programme team for unitary. So it's something that we could feed back through the Leaders Oversight Board and the Joint Committee. So tomorrow I'll see if I can find out who's doing, and then I'll let you know who's involved in it.
So perhaps in theory, if we say to James, you know, we'd like to set up some sort of working party, but the actual dynamics of it in terms of working with the project group, etc., will need to be worked out when we know a little bit more about who's looking into it and what stage they're at.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think the shadow, if we get selected and elected, those of us that will be going for the new unitaries would appreciate a template to come forward that had been thought through by the standing committee, whereby they can then consider it. And I'm sure they, you know, and I'm sure we'll come up with a good proposal that they will accept. So I think if James can sort out how we do that, maybe that should be the objective, to come up with a proposal to put before them at some time during 2021.
It is on the list, but of course the list is huge, and there are things that are really priority. So it's something that needs to be done under shadow, and I'm sure the shadow authorities would welcome the experience from this group, because there isn't that much experience within, you know, it depends who's elected, of course, does it not? So if you have a whole new range of councillors, there will be very limited experience, heaven forbid. So I think that's the way forward. I think we should, this panel should get together with input from our independent people as well, because that will all be worthwhile going into this process in the same way, Richard, as we've done with health and integration on health. So.
It's very good.
Obviously, this isn't my part. It's particularly yours. But particularly on page 27 of yours, you know, relationship with the kind of other stakeholders. I think there is an important work that the panel should consider. You know, Richard quite rightly challenges us around kind of domestic violence. There are actually other elements in terms of what are you doing in terms of other scrutiny bodies for others, whether that be a scrutiny panel or something, to make sure that they're holding to account where appropriate that shared kind of ambition. Because this one here, and there's a particular line, I can't remember where it is in here, something around the government. Oh yeah, it's the stated ambition of the government for force to force and multi-agency collaboration to increase. I think that whole multi-agency and making sure that we can actually all work together can be a real force for good as part of the kind of changes in kind of local government. And I know from myself and kind of leaders and whoever is elected will make sure that we need to kind of build on the work done, because it should actually, you know, one of the big state benefits, instead of 8 councils, you know, there's going to be 2. That's going to make it potentially kind of much easier. You know, our new operating models in local policing areas in terms of already mirror yours, so it makes those kind of opportunities to kind of work together hopefully easier.
I think Stephen's just expanded the work of that working party, which is I think very, very useful to point out. You know, we aren't isolated. We need to work with other partners.
I think, Chair, it sounds as if what the panel is saying is that it wants to set up a working party to look at how the panel operates at the moment. Firstly, to take into account the national guidance, and then for that to lead into potentially coming up with some inputs to the appropriate body within the local government reorganisation structure to inform how the panel might operate after unitary reorganisation. So, two elements of the task. In the first instance, looking at the national advice on guidance and national guidance on best practice that has just been published, and then leading into the second element about how the panel may need to be changed in future to reflect the post-local government reorganisation world. Is that a fair?
As usual, James has got it exactly. So we all agreed that we do that.
Do we have some willing volunteers to serve on said working party?
Well, I would certainly like to.
Well, on that subject, Chairman, let's not forget we've got deputies as well. Yes, so you know, we can also delegate to our deputies as well, because I think certainly the leaders, and I know Ian is going to be very busy on the programme.
On to the last item on the agenda. Is it the last item? James, do you want to deal with this one?
Thank you, Chair. This is fundamentally the standard agenda item which enables the panel to maintain an overview of its work programme, to ensure that its resources, which are fundamentally the time and expertise of you members, is used to best effect. So the work programme is set out on page 77-78, the appendix to the report. I think, as you highlighted at the top of the meeting, we're in for a very packed last 3 months of 1920, due to panel meetings being telescoped. And, of course, the primary focus of the next panel meeting on the 4th of February 2020 will be on the Commissioner's 2 proposed precepts. Now, and this will be the first time that the panel has experienced a meeting dealing with 2 proposed precepts. So I think, although there are other items of discretionary business listed, I would counsel not putting too much on that agenda, given it's the meeting in the year when the panel deals with its one of its foremost statutory functions, which is looking at precepts. So hopefully that part of the report is clear, and happy to take any questions, Chair. There's also an additional element which is asking the panel to confirm its future participation in the National Association of Police, Fire and Crime panels as set out in the report. This was brought to the panel meeting in October. The panel agreed in principle that it wanted to continue, but there was an issue around the ability to pay the subscription that was proposed for the National Association at that time. Since then, the National Association has had its AGM, took the view that it wanted to move away from a subscription-based model. So, on that basis, hopefully the panel can turn an in principle commitment to future participation to a complete commitment. Again, the report provides a bit of background on that. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, on that or any other aspect of the work programme.
Okay, so shall we deal with the work programme first? I mean, you set out there on page 78. I think, as James said, we'll have our work cut out to have 2 precepts there in February. So I would think probably other items might have to move to a later one. But apart from that, any other comments?
Just request an earlier start on the 4th, on the basis that we have 2 quite sizable projects to go through. Would make sense.
Yeah. Okay. Is everyone happy with the 1 o'clock start, as we did today?
I'd start that earlier.
Or even earlier?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it the... Would that be all right with you?
Well, so, going to go on till
yeah. 12:30 or?
What time?
Andre suggested we start a bit earlier, and I said 1, but he thought earlier than that, so...
Yeah, I mean, we could start in the morning.
Make more sense.
Say 10 o'clock.
Well, if we have a 10 o'clock, I suppose that we'd have to have a break, yeah.
Well, I think, Chair, dare I say, I don't think it would be effective to have a meeting that starts at 10 o'clock with a view to then running that meeting all the way to finish at 4 o'clock, shall we say.
Finish early.
Yeah,
Finish early.
if what the panel is saying is that it wants to make the agenda for the 4th of February the normal administrative items, but then just the 2 precepts and nothing else, then I would hope with some reasonable management, if you started that at 1 o'clock, you should be done within a reasonable amount of time, with no other business on the agenda. So, whilst you might be looking at, say, a 12:30 start rather than a 1 o'clock start, I don't think you would need to say, well, we need to start at 10 or 11, deal with in order to enable us to deal with 2 precepts and be finished by 3. I think that would be with some effective management of the meeting, that it shouldn't take that long just to do 2 precepts. Of course, it is uncharted territory. I stand to be massively contradicted, but.
Will it not be? We've discussed this before, actually, in Corby.
Just a small correction. It won't be the first time that you've done it. You did do it last year. So I can't believe you can't do it in 4 hours, starting at 1 and finishing by 5.
I would have thought we could do it in one session. If you could start a little bit earlier, but...
It's going to be really, really busy. You know, as I say, we've got LGR, we've got loads of stuff to do.
I don't think we need to do a morning and an afternoon. That hasn't proved necessary for the rest of the fire stuff that we've done, and we've had quite a few topics to discuss. So, shall we say 12:30, and then okay. So, no extra items brought up. The only thing that was mentioned earlier on, right at the beginning, was because it was in the minutes. The last one was about ICT. I don't know if that's something perhaps in the future we could put on the work programme, not necessarily in this March, but at some point, because there's so much going on with the ICT systems, and it's something that I know Stephen's working on quite a bit.
I think that could very easily be the subject of a briefing session outside a panel meeting, Chair, rather than
possibly, yeah.
Or a briefing session could then lead to a more focused scrutiny session at a panel meeting.
Okay. Yes, sorry.
What were you going to say? So 12:30 to what? 4? I mean, already now it is 4:30, and today is not a precept. So say 5 o'clock. Do you estimate that you'll be finished by then?
I would think maximum 5, but I would hope a lot earlier than that.
And correctly, Chair, the panel is saying that apart from the normal administrative items, so the minutes, the work programme, it just wants the items on the 2 precepts on the agenda for the 4th of February.
Yeah.
You might bring some sleeping bags in just in case it goes pear-shaped.
No. Okay, so...
Just one small thing.
Yeah.
May I ask, as part of it, we may bring something around the capital programme and estates, because it has a significant impact on it. But other than that, I agree with you, we won't bring any other business.
I think that has an impact on the budget, so I think that would be reasonable. If we can just do the last item, which is the future participation in the National Association Police Fire and Crime panel. panels. As you've heard, the decision was that there wasn't a subscription, therefore we don't have to work out how we pay it, which should be useful ongoing with unitary as well, with all that change. So is everyone happy to continue participation or be a member of it on that basis? Okay? All decided. So, thank you very much for your attendance, and